Chapter 12-13. Mu Yichen stood up and walked out of the cell. His face turned pale with fright. Outside the cell, there were a few cold corpses lying on the floor. Some of them were sitting close to the wall with their heads tilted to one side. Their eyes were wide open and red and white stains were splattered on the wall. Some of them were lying on the floor in a strange posture. Blood was flowing on the floor like a river. They seemed to have been dealt with silently. They did not even have time to react before they died. What was more frightening was that they did not struggle at all. Mu Yichen was shocked. When did this happen? Could it be that these people were dealt with by that girl? He had never seen anyone with such terrifying skills. He was actually able to get rid of more than 10 people in one go without him noticing. Some of these people were well-trained assassins. The rest were Special Forces soldiers with extraordinary aptitude in the military. Special Forces soldiers. What kind of concept was that? They were agile and had outstanding awareness. There was no doubt about their combat ability. Yet, this girl had relied on her own strength to take care of all of them. The air was filled with the smell of blood. Mu Yichen was so shocked that he could not control himself. The impact of the scene was so strong that he was a little dazed. Suddenly, Mu Yichen thought of something. He quickened his pace and looked at the corpses one by one. However, when he saw a corpse leaning against the wall, he was stunned and immediately walked over. The man leaning against the wall had a hideous and terrifying scar on his face. His expression was one of terror. His eyeballs were bulging and there was no sign of struggle. Obviously, he was dealt with in an instant. Mu Yichen looked at him deeply. There was a hint of pain on his face. He suddenly raised his hand and covered his eyes with his trembling hand. He felt a little sad and pain in his heart. "I'm sorry." His lips trembled slightly as he uttered these 3 words. In fact, in his world, there was a clear distinction between good and evil. There was a clear distinction between right and wrong. Initially, he was filled with hatred and contempt towards this man. However, he gradually realized that this man was different from the others. On the surface, he looked ferocious. With a hideous scar on his face, he looked like a malicious ghost. But if he didn't have this scar, he would be a kind-looking man. Mu Yichen had always been grateful. When he was being tortured, it was this man who came and stopped him at the right time. It was also this man who gave his porridge to them. At that time, he was injured and had a fever. It was also this man who took off his jacket and gave it to him. In his mind, the words that the scarred man had said to him suddenly rang out. "I don't have any other intentions towards you. I just feel that there's still some conscience in my heart that I can't get over." Suddenly, images flashed before his eyes. The knife-scarred man was sitting outside the iron prison. When he looked at him, there was a trace of genuine tenderness in his eyes. "I have a daughter too. She's about the same age as you. The reason why I'm doing this is to give my daughter a better life. But I realize that I seem to have taken the wrong path. I've decided that once I'm done with this, I'll wash my hands of this business." Chapter 12-14. "Kid, don't worry. When the time comes, I'll secretly let you go and let you reunite with your son. You're a smart kid. Don't make a fuss, understand? Bear with it. When they're resting, I'll create an opportunity to let you go." Mu Yichen stood up slowly and gave him a solemn military salute. "Xiao Yichen." At this moment, Yu had also been unchained and walked over. "Hurry up and leave. Someone will be here soon. We won't be able to leave." Just as he finished speaking, he heard someone open the locked door of the warehouse in the dark. The next second, the door suddenly opened wide. A wave of fully armed soldiers walked in with their guns raised. The lights in the warehouse were instantly turned on. The leader of the soldiers walked in. However, when his gaze fell on the corpses all over the floor, he was stunned. "What's going on?" he shouted, but no one responded. The people who were assigned to guard the warehouse had all been killed by Lisa, so no one responded. His eyes widened in shock as he slowly looked around. All 12 of them had been killed without a sound. The scene was very clean. There were no traces of a struggle at all. He widened his eyes in disbelief. His eyeballs were about to pop out of their sockets. He raised his head and looked at the 3 children. Complicated and bewildered emotions flashed across his face. Then, a cold glint flashed across his eyes. Could this be the work of the 3 children? Lisa shielded Yu behind her. Mu Yichen also looked at them cautiously. Hold them down. The man ordered sternly. Lisa said coldly, I'll cover you. You guys retreat. Mu Yichen did not say anything. He grabbed Yu's arm and ran toward the back door. There was an iron gate that was originally tightly sealed. However, no matter how intricate the lock was, in Lisa's hands, she could pry open 20 locks in a minute while blindfolded. It was completely vulnerable. The man was shocked and shouted, Catch those 2 children, don't let them run away. One of the soldiers raised his pistol and aimed at Mu Yichen's calf. However, Lisa was 1 step ahead of him. She raised her gun and fired. In the blink of an eye, it naturally flew out of the barrel, cut through the air, and aimed at the pistol in the soldier's hand. Peng! The bullet accurately hit the muzzle of the handgun in the soldier's hand. The handgun made a deafening sound and exploded in the soldier's hand. The poor soldier's hand was covered in blood from the explosion. His hand that was holding the gun was blown apart, and he let out a cry of pain. The captain was stunned. He did not expect this seemingly harmless young girl to have such superb marksmanship. Kill her. He issued another order. However, the girl suddenly put away her gun and pulled out a short dagger from her waist belt. Her figure flashed, and her nimble figure rushed into the crowd like a ghost. She raised the short dagger in her hand. Under the light, the short dagger shone with a cold and deadly light. Poof! A line of blood splattered. The captain who was giving orders just now was the first to have his neck slit by her. In just a moment, his face was hideous. He held his neck and fell to the ground. The others were even more shocked. However, they reacted quickly and aimed their guns at her. Chapter 12:15. Along with the miserable cries that rose and fell one after another, a few people in the crowd actually fell down sparsely. Shoot her! Shoot her! Someone screamed as if he had seen a ghost. The next second, a cold blade was pressed against his neck. In an instant, his flesh was exposed, and hot blood splashed onto the others. Lisa was a famous melee killer. Her attacks were fast, accurate, and ruthless, leaving no room for maneuver. Often, when these people were still aiming, their necks would be slit. Once she attacked, the result would be fatal. Shoot! Shoot! However, before he could finish his sentence, a series of orderly footsteps came from behind him. So many people bullying a child. Child abuse? Heh, interesting. A bright voice suddenly sounded in the empty underground caisson. There was a hint of cynicism in his tone. Everyone felt a chill run down their spines and stood up abruptly to look around. They turned around and looked back and forth, but they didn't find any unfamiliar figures. Everyone looked at each other, obviously not knowing where the voice came from. At this moment, a poof sound was heard, and the sound of a silenced gunshot echoed in the silent warehouse. In the crowd, the man who was aiming at Lisa and was about to shoot fell to the ground. The bullet hit him in the middle of his eyebrows, and there was a hole with blood flowing out. Everyone's faces were filled with shock, and they became even more solemn. Everyone present was an elite special forces soldier, and each of them had extraordinary skills. However, someone actually broke through the guards outside the caisson and broke in. What was infuriating was that at this moment, he was like a ghost's shadow, lurking in a place they did not know, and could easily take their lives. One of the soldiers shouted angrily, "Who is it? Come out." The voice replied lazily, "What a bunch of good-for-nothings." The ghostly voice gradually approached, and it was almost next to the person's ear. The soldier's body stiffened, and he subconsciously wanted to turn around, but a pair of hands mercilessly climbed onto his shoulders. In the blink of an eye, his throat was tightly gripped. And Jia stood beside him with a smile, holding Colt tightly with one hand, and pressed it against his temple. He whispered in his ear, "I'm here." Who are you?" Anjia smiled gently and raised his head proudly. He recited his impressive opening speech as if he was reciting a book. "I am the Mercenary Paradise's chief commander, Master Anjia, who is loved by everyone, who is loved by everyone, who is loved by everyone, who is loved by everyone." Bang! A gunshot was heard. His head instantly exploded. Before the poor soldier realized what was going on, he fell at Anjali's feet. "You dare to be arrogant with me when you're only at this level?" And Jia raised his head lazily and warned the group of people who were ready to make a move, "Don't take advantage of a hero, or your head will explode." Just as he finished speaking, a man swiftly took out a pistol and pointed it at Njia. However, before he could raise his hand, another gunshot rang out. The man fell heavily to the ground, his head bleeding profusely. It was as if the Grim Reaper was just around the corner, and as long as he stretched out a finger, he would be dead in the blink of an eye. It turned out that there was more than one person. "Looks like there's another powerful sniper." And Jia looked at the body on the ground and sighed. "Didn't I tell you not to move? Bullets don't have eyes." Chapter 12:16. "You retreat first, leave this to me." Lisa turned around and left first. In a flash, the special forces that rushed in quickly surrounded Njia and aimed their guns at him. However, no one dared to be the first to shoot. Njia lit a cigarette absent-mindedly and cast a sidelong glance around. "Red Sparrow, I'll leave the rest to you." At the door, Red Sparrow was fully armed and slowly walked in. She played with two tri-edged bayonets in her hands with a cold sneer on her lips. With a wave of her hand, a silver light flashed and the bayonets mercilessly cut open the necks of the surrounding enemies. She quickly unfolded her windbreaker and turned around, bending over to block the spurting blood for Njia. With a gloomy gaze, she looked around and ordered in a low voice, "Go." In an instant, the warehouse was lit up. A few figures rushed in as Red Sparrow's subordinates kicked open the door and barged in. Vermilion Bird leaped into the crowd. Thunder turned around, and the dagger in his hand spun rapidly in his palm. It was as if the dagger in his hand was spinning at an extremely fast speed. In an instant, he sealed their throats. Vermilion Bird spread his arms and spun around, and several people fell to the ground. Even small shrimps are so arrogant these days, forming gangs and forming gangs. How dare a few big men bully a child? "You made me waste my vacation on you." And Jia threw a left hook and knocked down two men. He stomped on them and cursed seriously, "I worked hard for a year and finally got a vacation. Give it back to me. Give it back to me." And Jia is so cruel. A mercenary muttered in a cold sweat as he knocked down an enemy. And Jia rarely gets a vacation. He must be in a bad mood to be assigned to a mission. Another person pursed his lips and expressed his understanding. That person silently complained, "The key is that the mission is to deal with a bunch of trash. It's not challenging at all." And Jia glanced at them coldly. "You talk so much on a mission, are you tired of living?" Then, he turned around and lifted his long leg, kicking a man who wanted to sneak up on him to the ground. On the other side, Red Sparrow's skills were flawless and neat. She grabbed the man's throat with both hands and twisted it, sweeping out a flying kick. Her cold and hard temperament was as sharp as a knife, as cold as a sword, and her fierce aura was like that of an Azura. And Jia is still so ferocious. It's quite scary. Anjia's partner, Luca, walked in with his arms crossed. He casually looked around and clicked his tongue in amazement. Then, he saw a man in black flying towards him. He calmly dodged the attack. The man howled in pain on the ground, struggling to hold his abdomen as he rolled around. Luca calmly stepped on his head and ravaged it mercilessly. As he did so, he said lazily, "Don't you know that China has a law protecting minors? What kind of man is he to bully two children?" Bang! 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 The sniper sounds hidden in the darkness rang out one after another in the silent basement. The sound of bullets piercing through hearts like meteors, accompanied by the sound of people being shot, rose and fell one after another. These weaklings aren't even enough for me to play with. Luca used his hand as a knife and knocked one of them unconscious before kicking him to the side. He then whistled at Xianxia. Don't go overboard. It won't be fun if you make a big commotion. It was inevitable that the government would be alerted and escalate to an international incident. Then, it would be meaningless. Chapter 12:17. How dare you interrupt my vacation? Go to hell. His attacks were vicious and ruthless, even mercilessly aimed for the man's groin. Luca and Vermilion Bird's faces darkened as their eyes twitched. The country's special forces were indeed famous, but when they met Mercenary Paradise's two trump cards, Vermilion Bird and Xianxia, they were, at best, small fry. In the blink of an eye, the ground was littered with people. Xianxia, on the other hand, was still venting his anger mercilessly. Get up. Did I make you fall? Xianxia picked up a pitiful man and pinched his philtrum with a smirk. He then executed a beautiful 1-inch punch with both hands. After a few punches, the man let out a few intense cries and fainted. You can't even take a beating. Is that all you've got? You can't even withstand my gaze. Angrily, Xianxia cupped his fists and ruthlessly kicked the lower bodies of the men on the ground. Luca covered his eyes and shuddered in fear at the sight. It was too brutal. When Xianxia was vicious, he was practically a murder weapon. Hence, when Vermilion Bird and Xianxia's other team arrived at the scene, they had already cleaned up the place. The people had already been cleaned up, and those who remained were either dead or injured. It was a tragic sight. Everyone's eyes twitched violently. Could it be that they rushed here fully armed just to collect the corpses? ===. It seemed that they, the corpse collecting team, had nothing to do with this. Where's Tianyu? Luca walked over and asked Xianxia. Xianxia replied, Lisa covered them as they left. We'll gather at the bridge entrance in 20 minutes. Then, let's leave, too. Lisa covered Yu and Mu Yichen as they got into a car. Mu Yichen's heart was slightly at ease when he got into the back seat. He raised his head and asked quizzically, Yu, who is this girl? Lisa glanced at him from the corner of her eyes, her gaze cold. Along the way, she kept a cold face and did not say a word. If not for her flesh and blood and the warmth of her body reminding him that she was a living person, Mu Yichen would really doubt whether she was a human or a robot. Yu said, this is my bodyguard. Death Guard. Mu Yichen's eyes twitched. He naturally understood what a death guard was. Most of the death guards were assassins and mercenaries who secretly protected their employers. If necessary, they would even sacrifice their lives. It was a rather cruel profession. However, he never thought that this girl would be a death guard. She was still so young. Mu Yichen would not have believed that such a young child could become a death guard if he had not seen her terrifying skills with his own eyes. Mu Yichen looked at her with a complicated expression before shifting his gaze to Tianyu. There were too many mysterious things about his younger brother. He wanted to probe further, but he could only wait patiently for the day when Tianyu would confess his identity to him. But now, he could not wait any longer. Hence, Mu Yichen said in a deep voice, Yu, there's something that I want you to give me an answer to when we get home. What answer? Your identity. Yu was stunned. He turned to look at him with a slightly changed expression. Okay. Yu pursed his lips. I'll tell you when we get home. He originally intended to be frank with Mu Yichen when they got home. Mu Yichen's heart warmed as he smiled at him. However, in the next second, there was a dong sound, and a strange sound came from the back of the car. Chapter 12:18. Swish. Swish. Two sounds were heard. Another 2 bullets pierced through the air and hit the glass, leaving 2 bullet holes. There's a chase from behind. Mu Yichen was startled and quickly ordered, step on the accelerator. The chauffeur stepped on the accelerator at his command. Mu Yichen knocked on the glass and coldly ordered, the glass isn't bulletproof, get down. He reached out to press Xianxia's head down and protected him in his arms. Lisa, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, rolled down the window and glanced behind her. There were 4 to 5 military vehicles chasing after them. Bullets kept flying toward them. Lisa nimbly dodged one, and a bullet hit the rearview mirror, shattering it instantly. Lisa shielded her eyes with her hand to prevent the glass from splashing into her eyes. She turned her head and spoke in a cold voice, which was rare for her. "Step on the accelerator." Her childish voice was at odds with her cold temperament. Lisa did not dare to relax for a moment. She took out a pistol from her waist belt and waited. She hooked her earpiece and shouted, "Vermilion bird, vermilion bird." After a while, Vermilion bird's short reply came through the earpiece. "Got it." Lisa coldly said, "We're being chased. Quickly come to our aid." "Got it." The car sped along. She stepped on the accelerator and the car sped along the mountain road. Lisa held the gun and stared at the rearview mirror in the car without blinking, constantly paying attention to the situation behind them. Behind them, 4 military vehicles were still in hot pursuit. The military vehicles were all modified and had excellent performance. The entire vehicle was bulletproof. The magazine in her hand had a total of more than 10 bullets. She had to use every bullet properly and not waste any of them. With just a thought, a meticulous plan emerged in her mind. Lisa calmly removed the silencer. The silencer affected the bullet's power and was very disadvantageous for long-range shooting. Mu Yichen watched in a daze as she skillfully assembled the gun and changed the magazine. He was secretly speechless. This girl was really not simple. Disassembling the gun only took a few seconds, and the whole process was as smooth as flowing water. Lisa glanced at him from the corner of her eyes. Seeing that he was silently sizing her up, her eyes narrowed and her gaze turned cold. "What are you looking at?" Mu Yichen's face stiffened. Her tone was stiff and cold, giving people the feeling that she was cold and arrogant, without a trace of anger. Lisa said in a low voice, "Listen, don't move. Understand? What can I do for you?" "No need." Lisa looked at the rearview mirror, her face still cold. She said concisely, "I can handle it alone." She was a woman of few words. If she could express something with one word, she would never use two. The car drove onto the main road. Behind them, 5 cars were following closely behind. Although they had stepped on the accelerator to the maximum, the cars behind them were still following closely, and the distance between them was constantly shortening. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, ding ding dang dang, rows of bullets hit the car door, causing smoke to rise. It was like a death warrant from hell. It was 5 off-road jeeps. Lisa blinked, and the detailed structure of the car instantly appeared in her mind. The driver increased the gear again, stepped on the accelerator, and drove the car to the maximum speed. Fortunately, the car's performance was not bad. At 8,000 revolutions per minute, the car's speed was more than 200 kilometers per hour. It sped all the way. In the biting wind, the scenery outside the window flashed by. 6 cars were chasing each other on the spacious mountain road. It was like a scene from a blockbuster movie. Chapter 12:19. Yu Yu was protected in Mu Yichen's arms, so he could not see the intense chase behind the car. However, he could hear the roaring sound of the car engine. Whoosh! Lisa was about to shoot when a bullet broke the window at the back of the car. Clang! The glass shattered and the debris splashed onto Mu Yichen's body. The broken glass scratched Mu Yichen's neck and left a trace of blood. Mu Yichen instinctively hugged Yu Yu tighter. "Brother," Yu Yu grabbed Mu Yichen's clothes worriedly. Mu Yichen smiled comfortingly and gently stroked the back of his head. "Don't be afraid, Yu Yu. I won't let anything happen to you." "Okay." Yu Yu responded in a low voice. However, he still felt uneasy. Although he was a little awkward, he still forced himself to say it out loud. "Stupid brother. I don't want anything to happen to you either." Mu Yichen was stunned. His heart melted and he unconsciously smiled. "I'll be fine too." Lisa had been looking for an opportunity. However, when the car made a sharp turn, another row of bullets came from behind. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, the bullets shattered the glass with a ding 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 sound. Bang, the bullets pierced through the driver's head. Mu Yichen's entire body was stained with blood. Shocked, he looked up in bewilderment, only to see the man in the driver's seat convulsing violently. His head had been blasted by a bullet, and his flesh and blood were splattered everywhere. The man stopped breathing in an instant. His body, which was still warm, fell in front of the steering wheel. The car lost control and almost went off the cliff. Lisa rushed over and steadied the steering wheel. She then pushed the body to the side. The car was barely stabilized. However, the accelerator was still pressed down. Yu wanted to look up to see what was going on. Mu Yichen did not let him look. Yu, don't look. Huh? What was going on? Mu Yichen, who had always been calm, spoke with a hint of fear and trembling. Lisa knelt on one knee and carefully avoided the dense rain of bullets. She held the steering wheel and asked without looking back, "Do you know how to drive?" Mu Yichen's brows furrowed. Who? Lisa turned around expressionlessly and locked her eyes on him. You. I do. You. Lisa kicked the door open and pushed the driver's body out of the car. Mu Yichen carried him to the side and warned him, "Don't move, do you understand? Don't raise your body. There are bullets behind you. Don't get hurt. Okay. Be good and listen to me." With that, Mu Yichen nimbly climbed into the driver's seat, pushed the driver's corpse out, closed the door, and quickly adjusted his seat. He then stepped on the clutch and the accelerator to raise the car's gear. His driving skills were not good. He had touched the steering wheel a little. A year ago, when he drove for the first time, he could drive very steadily. His coach praised him for his talent. It was not his first time driving, so he was not unfamiliar with it. Lisa said, "Step on the accelerator." Okay. He tried to lower his body as he increased the speed of the car to avoid the bullets coming from behind. Lisa used the back of the seat as cover. She knelt on one knee and held the gun. The next corner was her chance. There's a sharp turn in front. Be careful. Chapter 12:20. Mu Yichen stared straight ahead with a cold expression. Yu curled up into a ball obediently and did not move at all. There was a sharp turn in front. Mu Yichen quickly pulled the handbrake and stepped on the accelerator lightly. The car turned horizontally and horizontally. The friction between the tires and the ground caused sparks to fly and smoke to fill the air. The cars behind them also turned the corner quickly. As a result, a huge weakness was exposed. The most vulnerable part of a car's tires was the side of the tire. It was also the most difficult time to control the car when it was turning the corner. Lisa was waiting for this opportunity. She held the pistol tightly with both hands. Her beautiful eyes narrowed dangerously as she aimed accurately at the two jeeps behind them. Bang! 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 She shot the front and rear tires of the jeep that was in front. The tires exploded instantly. As the car sped into the bend, the result of the flat tire was that the jeep jolted violently. The entire car flipped over, revealing the chassis. The corner of Lisa's lips twitched, and two more shots were fired. The bullets flew through the air. They hit the fuel tank under the car's chassis. At that moment, boom! The car exploded and turned into a ball of fire. The flames soared into the sky. A wave of fire surged over, and a tremendous force of impact swept over with an earth-shattering momentum. Mu Yichen felt a burning sensation on his back. A gust of searing heat rushed up and brushed against their backs. Lisa's hair was flying wildly. She squinted her eyes. She had used 4 bullets and had 6 bullets left. Mu Yichen turned the corner and stepped on the accelerator. The jeep that was hit by the explosion of the fuel tank lost control and crashed into the cliff wall. The cars behind them were obviously unprepared. The two cars collided and kissed each other intimately. At that moment, it was too late for the car to make it in time. The jeep that was almost burnt to ashes flew for tens of meters. Then, the two cars rolled all the way and broke through the guardrail at the same time. They flew out of the cliff. The three cars behind hurriedly braked, past the burning wreckage, and continued to chase after them. Lisa sat in the car and changed the magazine. Mu Yichen glanced at her from the corner of his eye and was shocked to find a trace of blood on her cheek. "Are you hurt?" Lisa looked up coldly at him, but didn't say anything. She just quietly counted the equipment. In fact, the blood on her face was not her blood. However, she did suffer a small injury just now. Amidst the dense rain of bullets, a bullet grazed her headset and grazed her neck, causing a graze on the side of her neck. There was some blood. It was just a minor injury, not worth mentioning. For an assassin who had walked out of a bloody corpse, this kind of injury was nothing to her. Unfortunately, the radio headset was destroyed by the bullet. As a result, they lost contact. "Are you all right?" Mu Yichen asked worriedly. Lisa didn't even look at him. She lowered her head and quietly inserted the bullets into the magazine. Her movements were smooth and fluid. In a few seconds, she was done with the equipment. Mu Yichen held the steering wheel tightly and secretly sized her up. This girl gave off a cold vibe. She was as cold as death. Other than a murderous aura, there was no sign of life at all. In his heart, a trace of heartache flashed past. Chapter 12:21. In his mind, an 8 or 9-year-old girl should be naive and innocent. She should have a bright and gentle smile all night long. She should be playful, like a little bird. If a girl had to be compared, she should be like a beautiful flower bud that slowly bloomed with youth. She, on the other hand, was like a sharp knife. Cold and stern. Whether it was her eyes or her voice, there was no warmth at all. Mu Yichen couldn't help but be distracted for a moment. The car swayed a little. Lisa looked up sharply and looked at him. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, drive properly," Lisa said again. Her cold and indifferent tone was like an order that couldn't be disobeyed. His tone was as stiff as his instructor in the special training camp, meticulous. She was so young, but she spoke with a little accent. Lisa looked through the rearview mirror and suddenly ordered, "Slow down." "What?" "Slow down," she repeated again. Mu Yichen was a little confused. The car was rushing forward and it was too late to shake off the three cars. It wasn't easy to get rid of them, but now she wanted to slow down. What was she thinking? "Are you crazy? If we slow down, they will catch up again. We can't slow down." Lisa narrowed her eyes. "Don't doubt my words. Slow down. You." Mu Yichen was at a loss for words. "Listen to me. I will guarantee your safety," Lisa said righteously. Mu Yichen's knuckles turned white as he held the steering wheel. Beads of cold sweat seeped out of his forehead. "Why? Are you scared?" Lisa said coldly, "If you are, I will drive." Mu Yichen pursed his lips. "Scared? You must be joking." He was born in the military and had experienced life and death situations. Why would he be scared? Yu suddenly said, "Brother, I believe her. We will listen to her." Yu's thoughts were simple. Although Mu Yichen and Lisa had undergone hellish training, the two of them were different. Mu Yichen's training was mostly about simulated battles, but Lisa had experienced countless actual battles. Her experience was obtained by shedding blood. In terms of experience, Lisa would not take the risk if she did not have absolute confidence. Mu Yichen gritted his teeth. "All right, I'll listen to her." As soon as he finished speaking, his eyes turned sharp. He suddenly stepped on the clutch, lowered the gear, and braked slightly. The three vehicles quickly caught up and fired at him from behind. However, they seemed to have some misgivings. If they could capture him alive, they would not hurt him. Therefore, the bullets were sparser than before. Yu remained motionless in the corner. He had never felt that death was so close to him. It was so close that it felt like it was only an inch away. One of the jeeps stepped on the accelerator and caught up with them. When it reached the side of their car, it crashed into them with a loud bang and forced their car into the middle of the road. The friction between the metal plates caused sparks to fly everywhere. There was a commotion in the car. Lisa said, "Step on the accelerator." Mu Yichen tried his best to stabilize the car and stepped on the accelerator. Lisa looked out the car window. The jeep was right next to them. The window rolled down and a man who looked like a soldier shouted angrily at them, "Stop the car! Stop the car!" However, the next second, the man was stunned. The car that they had chased for so long without being able to catch up with was actually driven by a 7 or 8-year-old child. They were dealt a heavy blow. Chapter 12:22. So powerful? Hit him. Lisa said. Mu Yichen quickly turned the steering wheel and hit the jeep. The two cars collided and rubbed against each other. Mu Yichen turned the steering wheel again. First, he swerved inwards, then he hit the jeep hard. Lisa suddenly raised her hand and aimed at the driver's temple. She pulled the trigger and a bullet went straight through his head. The throat of the soldier in the front passenger seat was also pierced. The car lost control and tilted to the right. Then, it hit the guardrail and rolled down the cliff. Boom! A fiery light exploded in the forest along with the rising smoke. The two cars behind them caught up again. One on the left and one on the right, sandwiching their car in the middle. They were neck to neck. Lisa nimbly climbed out of the sunroof and jumped. Her nimble body immediately crouched on the roof of the other jeep. She broke the window of the front passenger seat and jumped in. Before the person in the car could react, she had already given him a concussion from her uppercut. Then, a strong hand grabbed their collar and spun the dagger in her hand. The two pitiful men only felt a chill in their throats. Hot blood sprayed on the back of the seats. The strong smell of blood assaulted their nostrils. In just 30 seconds, the 4 people in the car were taken care of. Mu Yichen was stunned. F***ck. Did this girl have to be so fierce? Even fiercer than him? But, she was pretty cool. Yu looked at this scene and gulped. Then, she said slowly, "It's too scary to marry such a girl." Mu Yichen was silent. At this juncture, he was still in the mood to joke. Yu seemed to understand his gaze and said seriously, "I'm not joking. Don't you think she's very violent?" Mu Yichen pondered for a moment and admitted, "Yes, she's very violent." Not only was she violent, she was very violent. Yu said, "Violent girls are very scary." Why did he feel that Lisa was very cool? "I still prefer girls who are gentle and cute like my mommy," Yu said softly. Mu Yichen was even more silent. Did this kid have an Oedipus complex? This is not an Oedipus complex. Yu seemed to have seen through his doubts and said seriously. Mu Yichen felt that he had lost. This kid, did he have the ability to read minds? While Mu Yichen was cursing inwardly, the girl had already gotten into the driver's seat. She took control of the jeep, turned the steering wheel, and slammed it into another jeep. It was as if they were going to perish together with the enemy. Mu Yichen's heart skipped a beat at the sight. She couldn't be thinking of perishing together with these people, could she? He suddenly had an inexplicable worry in his heart. Lisa controlled the steering wheel tightly. She stepped on the accelerator fiercely and slammed into the jeeps but with an overbearing aura. Bam! 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 There's a cliff in front. Be careful. Yu suddenly reminded him. Mu Yichen looked ahead and saw a straight 90-degree bend not far away. Beyond the railing was a cliff. He suddenly understood what Lisa was trying to do. She was going to hit the last jeep off the cliff. Chapter 12:23. However, they seemed to have forgotten that Lisa's car was the same as theirs. It had been carefully modified and was bulletproof. The bullets that hit the car were light and harmless. Mu Yichen's car sped up and quickly turned the corner. Lisa stepped on the accelerator and had no intention of braking. She drove the jeep in front of her out of the cliff. Bang! The two cars sped out of the fence. The moment the car left the ground, Lisa quickly kicked open the door and jumped out of the car. She landed nimbly on the ground. The two cars flew a few meters in the air one after the other. Then, they crashed down the cliff. The cliff was tens of thousands of feet deep. It was not an exaggeration to say that they would be smashed to pieces if they fell down. A few seconds later, there was an earth-shattering explosion from the depths of the cliff. The fire almost lit up the entire valley. The deafening sound of the explosion echoed throughout the entire valley. Amidst the strong wind, she stood at the edge of the cliff. Her hair danced in the wind. Even though she was covered in blood, it did not affect her aura at all. Mu Yichen stopped the car by the cliff. When he got out of the car, his hand was already covered in cold sweat. Compared to simulated battles, a real battle was very cruel. In simulated battles, there was still a chance to salvage the situation if there was a mistake. However, in a real battle, if one made a wrong decision, it would be exchanged for a bloody lesson. Mu Yichen and Yu got out of the car and ran quickly to Lisa. When they saw that she was covered in blood, they were shocked. They thought that she was injured. Are you okay? He asked with concern. His face was anxious. Lisa glanced at him. Her lips were extremely cold. I'm still alive. She gave a concise reply and walked towards the car with a blank expression. Her style of speaking was so cool, Mu Yichen muttered in his heart. This girl's ability was indeed not to be underestimated. He trusted the right person. Lisa walked to the front of the car. Just as she was about to get in, her sharp ears caught a slight oddity. She lowered her body and saw that there was already a pool of oil on the ground. Mu Yichen's car had made a sharp turn just now and hit some gravel on the ground. The gas tank was damaged. Lisa frowned slightly. The car's fuel tank was broken. It seemed that it couldn't be driven. She took her equipment from the car and carried her combat bag. Then, she turned around and said, "Follow me." Oh. Yu immediately followed him. Mu Yichen chased after her. What's wrong? The car can't be driven? Yes, it's leaking oil. Oil spill? Mu Yichen was taken aback. Thinking back, he seemed to have accidentally crushed a very large rock in his panic. That rock was very sharp, and he was afraid that it had scraped the fuel tank. What do we do now? Let's go back. Lisa raised her head, raised her thumb, and gestured towards the Big Dipper in the night sky. She then pointed into the distance. That's north. Keep going north and meet up with the company. Mu Yichen nodded. The mountain road stretched for thousands of miles to the west. If they wanted to reach the rendezvous point, they would have to pass through a forest. If there were no accidents, they would be able to reach the rendezvous point by dawn. Lisa turned around and looked at Yu. Can you walk? Yes, I'm fine. Only then did Lisa turn around and continue walking forward. Mu Yichen felt that he had been left out. Chapter 12:24. Just as they entered the forest, they saw the headlights of cars not far away. Honk, 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 rows of military vehicles hurried past the shadows of the trees on the mountain road, causing the earth to tremble. In a secluded thicket, 3 figures were carefully hiding. Lisa peeked through the gaps between the branches and watched the well-trained troops rush toward the east. It was only when the vehicles were far away that Mu Yichen's anxious heart relaxed and he heaved a sigh of relief. It's not Vermilion Bird's team. Lisa had originally arranged for Vermilion Bird to meet her, but it seemed that this group of people was Mu Lianjue's men. Her wireless earpiece was broken, and she had lost contact with Vermilion Bird. It seemed that she could only rely on herself to reach the rendezvous point. She turned her face, and her thin lips inadvertently brushed across Mu Yichen's fair cheeks. Startled, Lisa looked up, only to see Mu Yichen looking at her calmly. She could not help pursing her lips. The two of them were very close, intimately clinging to each other. Lisa could even clearly hear his scorching heartbeat in his chest. Every beat was powerful. She moved back discreetly, but he held her back with one hand. She could not move an inch. Be careful. The leaves rustled in the wind. The last car passed through the mountain path and gradually disappeared into the distance. Everything returned to normal. What followed was a deathly silence. No one had the tacit understanding to break this silence. Mu Yichen's lips curled up slightly as a sharp dagger was pressed against his waist. Lisa coldly ordered, "Let go of me." She was not used to being touched by anyone, not even a finger. This was her taboo. To Lisa, her only target of protection was Yun Tianyu. Other than Yu, others were not within her scope of protection. Mu Yichen could not help but smile. So fierce? If I don't let go, will you really take action? Lisa did not deny it. I don't deny that I have such a plan. All right. Why don't we give it a try? Mu Yichen's hand, which was on her back, suddenly pressed down on her waist. Lisa was caught off guard and threw herself into his arms. She used all her strength to press down on his body. The side of the forest was a high slope, and the two of them rolled down the slope. A burst of dizziness, and chaotic breaths connected. Lisa felt a sharp pain in her waist, as if she had broken a small sapling on the hillside. She raised her head and looked at Mu Yichen's cold expression. She watched as his expression gradually changed from cold to playful. A sense of dizziness followed, and the two of them were still rolling on the hillside. Lisa tried to push him away, but it was futile. With a low gasp, Lisa quickly grabbed the root of a small tree and came to a stop with much difficulty. Lisa's eyes flashed. With a carp flip, she sat on top of him and gripped his throat tightly. With a spit, she spat out the grass in her mouth and coldly said, "Do you want to die?" Yu walked down the hill and glanced at the two helplessly. You two have such good stamina. Even now, you still have the leisure to flirt. ===. His words would not stop until they shocked everyone to death. Lisa. Mu Yichen. Don't waste your energy. Otherwise, you won't be able to walk out of this forest tonight. Chapter 12:25. Yu Yu's physique had always been weak. After walking down the hill, he started to pant. He did not exercise much as he had spent most of his time in the hospital when he was young. Although his health had improved, he did not have many opportunities to exercise outside. When Lisa saw that he was panting, she squatted down and said, "Come up." Yu walked around her. "It's okay, I can walk on my own." Lisa did not say anything. She walked in front of him, blocked him, and carried him up in a princess carry. Yu. Lisa was a head taller than Yu, and her physique was also more muscular than his. Her arms were well proportioned and beautiful, having been trained in over 100 battles. In addition, Yu was skinny. Even if she carried him in her arms, she did not feel tired at all. Yu was angry. "What are you doing? You're tired. Put me down." Yu kicked his legs angrily. Lisa stared at him. "Don't mess around." Mu Yichen chuckled behind them. Yu was even more annoyed. He glared at him. "What are you laughing at?" "Nothing." Mu Yichen held back his laughter and followed behind him. His eyes were gentle. The moonlight covered the ground with a layer of frost. The night was getting darker and the temperature suddenly dropped. The wind in the mountains was bone-chilling. When it blew on her body, it felt like a cold knife cutting into her bones. Gradually, even her hands became stiff and could not move freely. Lisa sniffed her nose that had turned red from the cold. She felt a sense of peace that she had not felt for a long time. She recalled the time when she was in the assassin camp. Every second was like walking on thin ice, and she even had to be careful when she breathed. In this secluded mountain, although she was cold, hungry, thirsty, and in a poor state, she could enjoy the free air without any worries. Nothing was more important than being alive. Including dignity. It was by relying on such a shocking will to survive that she was able to walk out of the assassin camp, leave that hellish place, and obtain a new life. Lisa carried Yu and walked quietly on the mountain path. The thick smell of blood lingered at the tip of her nose. The blood on her cheeks had already dried up, and there was a large patch of blood on her chest. At this moment, she couldn't tell if the blood came from her or the soldiers. Lisa lowered her head and looked at Yu in her arms. He closed his eyes in exhaustion. Beside her, Mu Yichen walked side by side with her. In her eyes, Mu Yichen was undoubtedly a high and mighty noble young master. Now that there was no water or food in this wilderness, such a proud and arrogant noble young master would definitely suffer some hardships. As he walked, Mu Yichen suddenly saw a sparkling lake in front of him. "There's a lake." Mu Yichen pointed. His body was covered in blood. The more he couldn't stand the smell of blood, the more he thought about whether he should wash himself properly. As he thought about it, he already had a direction under his feet and walked towards the small lake. Lisa put Yu down and walked to the lake. She stood with her arms crossed and saw that Mu Yichen was already squatting by the lake. "Yu, come here. There's water here, and the water is quite clean." Yu walked over. At this moment, his clothes were in a mess and he looked disheveled. He squatted by the lake and licked his dry lips. He looked hesitantly at the lake water. He wanted to drink it, but when he held it in his hands, he smelled a fishy smell. He wanted to drink it, but he felt disgusted. He stretched out his hand, but withdrew it awkwardly. He seemed to dislike the water quality of the lake. Chapter 12:26. Yu had a serious obsession with cleanliness. He didn't know if the lake water in the wilderness was clean or not. He frowned in disgust. Mu Yichen explained, "It's not smelly. It's just that the water has a strong fishy smell. Fresh water that hasn't been filtered always has this smell." Yu stretched out a finger solemnly. He wet the tip of his finger and brought it to his nose to smell it. Then, he frowned deeply. His face was ashen and very ugly. He usually loved cleanliness and had never even drunk tap water before. How could he tolerate such a terrible water quality now? Lisa walked to the side of the lake and reached out to test the temperature of the water. Although the lake water was very cold, the temperature in the wilderness was already very cold. Therefore, compared to the lake water, her fingers felt a little warmer. She cupped her hands and took a big gulp of the water. The fishy smell of the water rippled in her mouth and it was hard to swallow. Gulp. Lisa forced herself to swallow it down. Her stomach suddenly felt nauseous and she almost vomited. She frowned and smacked her lips. With a bitter face, she forced herself to take another big gulp. It was very quiet in the wilderness. The sound of her drinking attracted Yu's attention. He turned his head and saw that Lisa had actually drunk a few mouthfuls of water. His stomach felt even more nauseous. Mu Yichen also drank a few mouthfuls of water. The strong fishy smell spread between his lips and teeth. He also almost vomited. It tasted terrible. The fishy smell was so strong that Mu Yichen almost vomited. Yu saw that the two of them were frowning and thought that the water must be very hard to swallow. Therefore, he decided to give up. Lisa took off her outerwear and tore open her lapel. The bloodstains had already dried. Her clothes were tightly attached to her skin. She had to carefully separate them. Then, she dipped her hands in the lake water and washed the bloodstains on her face and chest. The cold lake water drenched her skin. The bone-chilling cold attacked her heart. It was as if even her blood had frozen. She couldn't help but gasp and her hands moved faster. Mu Yichen watched as she calmly took off her clothes in front of him. Since he was young, he had been taught that there was a difference between men and women. Therefore, he couldn't help but frown deeply. He looked away unnaturally and his face was strangely red. When Lisa finished washing and raised her head, Yu was already far away. He didn't force himself to drink the lake water. Even though he was thirsty and the lake water wasn't dirty, it was too hard to drink. Even if he was dying, he wouldn't drink it. Even if he died of thirst. On the way there, Yu decided to rest while the girl went to catch 2 snakes. She skillfully separated the meat from the innards and carefully washed them a few times. She planned to start a bonfire to cook some game to warm her body. While she was gathering firewood, she saw Yu trying to start a fire. She didn't know who misled him or if it was because this young master's experience in the wild was too pitiful. He casually gathered a bunch of dried leaves and branches together and clumsily rubbed a branch. However, there was no flame. Yu's expression was very ugly. He looked at the pile of dried leaves and felt depressed. Can't he just drill wood to extinguish the fire? Mu Yichen stood behind him. He wanted to laugh, but after thinking about it, he restrained himself. Chapter 12:27. Lisa picked up a lot of dry firewood and gathered a large number of dried leaves. Her movements in the grass attracted Mu Yichen's attention. She sat down on the ground, took out the flint she found, and took out a dagger. She knocked the flint with the dagger, and the sparks fell on the dried leaves. A wisp of smoke rose in spirals. With her efforts, she finally managed to start a wildfire. Lisa expressionlessly threw the dried branches and leaves into the fire. The fierce flames reflected her face red. She suddenly turned her face and looked at Yu, who was not far away, with a gloomy face. She said, "Come here." Yu frowned deeply. He was a little shocked. He started the fire for a long time, but there was no smoke. She made the fire in no time. How did she do it? Lisa skillfully skewered the snake meat and put it on the fire. She broke a few pieces of dry firewood and threw them into the flames. She said expressionlessly, "Rest for a while. We'll be on our way." Yu was stunned. He frowned, stood up, and sat down by the fire. Lisa turned the snake meat on the fire again and sniffed it gently. She could already smell the tempting fragrance. Her expression was calm without any ripples. The flickering flames were reflected in her deep eyes, and the red light flickered. Although the environment was so dangerous, there was no trace of a child's timidity in her fierce eyes. Her face was gloomy and steady, and her lips were cold and arrogant. There was no gentleness in her expression. Mu Yichen saw that her movements were swift. It seemed that she had a lot of experience in surviving in the wild. In fact, Lisa had experienced even more perilous environments than this and had survived them. When she was chased by the enemy army during a mission, she was forced into a dead end and had to escape into the Amazon jungle. In order to avoid being chased, she had to choose the most dangerous and tricky path. There were several times when she almost died in the snake's mouth. Who could understand the fear and trepidation of desperately moving through the jungle filled with the smell of poisonous insects and scorpions? Who could understand the hesitation and despair of curling up in the darkest corner and forcefully swallowing all the painful whimpers into the stomach? This kind of painful tempering had been exchanged for her outstanding skills. Lisa suddenly stood up and threw the leaf bag with the snake meat in front of Mu Yichen and Yu. She said coldly, "Eat it." "I'm not eating it." "Then rest for a while. We'll be on our way." Lisa turned and returned to the fire. After a pause, she said, "There are fierce beasts in the forest. We can't stay long." She was exhausted physically and mentally and physically, camouflage of the night. The night wind in the mountain forest was sharp and bone-piercing. Wolf howls could be heard from afar from time to time. Looking from afar, it was a vast expanse of whiteness. Lisa furrowed her brows and looked at the distant horizon, her sharp eyes shining brightly. It was late into the night. The wind in the forest was cold and strong. Lisa hugged her knees and leaned against the stone wall. Her eyes were slightly closed and her body was tightly bent. The clothes on her body were too thin. If she wasn't leaning against the fire, she was afraid that she would have frozen. She didn't dare to sleep. She didn't even dare to close her eyes for a while. First of all, in the extreme cold, her body temperature would drop very quickly. She was afraid that if she slept like this, she would die. Second of all, the wilderness was too dangerous. How could she let down her guard when there were wild beasts? She had to bring Yu back safely. This was her mission. Chapter 12:28. The fire gradually extinguished, leaving only a few sparks. The firewood had been used up. Lisa curled up, her hands numb from the cold. She leaned against the stone wall to avoid the cold wind. A thin layer of ice seemed to have formed on her face. Every pore was frozen, and it was difficult for her to even blink. She rubbed her hands and exhaled as she looked up at the night sky. Yu leaned against Mu Yichen and closed his eyes to rest. Mu Yichen leaned against the stone wall. His jacket was the one that the scarred man had handed to him. When he put his hands into the pocket to warm them up, he touched something hard. He was secretly shocked and took it out. It was a photo. In the photo, a girl was standing in an amusement park. She had a bright and warm smile on her cute face. On the back was a man's handwriting, "Ruoshue, Daddy loves you." Was this his daughter? Mu Yichen frowned slightly and put the photo back into the inner pocket over his heart. He turned around and glanced at Yu. At this moment, he was quietly leaning against him, his head resting on his shoulder. The wind lifted up his ink-black hair, brushing past his pale and thin face, entangling with his eyelashes. He looked a little weak, dispirited, and lifeless. He had to hurry. If he stayed here any longer, he might freeze to death in the wilderness. When the new sun slowly rose in the east, Lisa picked up a pile of leaves and carefully buried the traces of the dry fire. With the help of the sunrise at dawn, she vaguely determined the direction. With her good sense of direction, she slowly walked towards the north. Mu Yichen carried Yu on his back and followed closely behind. In the depths of the forest, the light of dawn pierced through the shadows of the trees. On the treetop, a cobra spat out its dark red tongue menacingly. The bullet pierced through a dark green leaf, and smoke rose into the air. Under the shade of a huge tree, Lisa tilted her head and looked at the cobra that had been accurately shot in the head. She played with the colt in her hand expressionlessly. She picked a few fruits from the tree and took a bite. The sour juice spread in his mouth. She threw it away with a "bah" sound. The fruit wasn't ripe yet, so eating it would upset the stomach. Mu Yichen looked at her. She was wearing a camouflage combat uniform, and her figure shuttled through the rainforest nimbly. She was like a cute and wild cat. She climbed up the tree and suddenly saw the colorful plants around her. She couldn't help but stretch out her hand and play with them. The corner of her mouth couldn't help but reveal a charming smile. He was actually laughing. Mu Yichen's eyes glinted. He actually saw a rare smile on her face. She was so beautiful when she smiled. Lisa's face softened with the mystery of the East and the delicacy of European descent. When she didn't smile, she was noble and cold, like an insufferably arrogant queen who looked down on all living things. When she smiled, there was a hint of gentleness unique to Eastern women. Her eyebrows flowed with charm, charming all living things. The new sun slowly rose from the horizon. In the morning light, the depths of the forest were dark and damp. The smell of poisonous insects and wild beasts filled the forest, one after another. A poison dart frog was perched not far away. Its pair of dull eyes stared at the girl on the tree trunk. From time to time, its stomach would swell and it would let out a strange croak. Chapter 12:29. Lisa hugged the huge combat bag and climbed to a higher place. The smell of the wild was humid and pungent. Mist lingered around the lake. A spearhead viper was coiled on a branch, and its heavy weight made the branch droop. It seemed to have smelled something tempting. It raised its triangular head high, and its vertical pupils focused, gathering a bloodthirsty murderous aura. A dark streak of shadow rushed over. Lisa quickly waved her hand and grabbed the spearhead viper's throat. She raised her eyebrows slightly, as if she was very dissatisfied with its sneak attack. She reached out and stroked its head. The spearhead viper suddenly opened its bloody mouth, baring its sharp fangs. Lisa's cold eyes met with it. Her gaze narrowed, and her two hands tore the spearhead viper apart. Blood and flesh splattered on the ground, and the corpse was thrown heavily into the grass. A group of ants was ready to move, and they gathered around the body of the spearhead viper. She picked a few ripe wild fruits from the tree and handed them to Mu Yichen and Yu Yu. Eat. Mu Yichen glanced at her, and then took the fruit from her hand. He wiped the dew and mud on the fruit on his clothes, and took a bite. It was sour, bitter, and astringent. He frowned. Yu Yu also took a bite, and closed his eyes because of the sourness. The taste was really indescribable. Lisa sat beside him, picked up a wild fruit, and took a bite. She swallowed it calmly. Her body was exhausted, and her stomach was already empty due to the high-intensity battle, so she had to pick some wild fruits along the way to fill her stomach. What time is it now? Yu Yu asked. Lisa looked up at the sky and then said, 5:00 in the morning. Let's continue. Yu Yu stood up. We have to get back before 10:00. I'll carry you. Mu Yichen walked forward and said. Yu Yu waved his hand. No need. I can walk by myself. As he spoke, he stubbornly propped up his tired body and walked in front. Mu Yichen's heart ached. He hurriedly walked forward and carefully protected him. In the hospital ward, Mu Wanru was shot in the abdomen. After emergency treatment, she was transferred to the ward for observation. Only then was she out of danger. At this moment, she was lying quietly on the bed, with tubes all over her body. Her face was sickly pale, and she was still unconscious. At dawn, her eyelids trembled and she finally woke up. However, the moment he woke up and opened his eyes, he was shocked by a black shadow sitting on the edge of the bed. That black shadow sat silently by the bed with his back to the window. Against the light, she couldn't see his face at all. She could only feel the cold air emitting from his body. Mu Wanru screamed in shock, breaking the long silence in the ward. Ah! In the next second, the lights flickered and the ward lit up. Mu Lianjue's expressionless face came into view. When she finally saw who was sitting on the edge of the bed, her face twitched violently. She finally heaved a sigh of relief, but she was still frightened by his gloomy face. Her heart skipped a beat, and she felt a little suffocated. She did not know how long she had been unconscious, but when she finally passed the critical period and woke up in a daze, she could not help feeling nervous when she saw his gloomy face. What happened? Why did he look like this? What exactly happened? He coldly said, "Humph. You're finally awake." Chapter 12:30. Fortunately, Mu Yichen was distracted for a split second and opened fire. The bullet penetrated her abdomen, but even so, it almost took her life. Mu Wanru's whitewashed lips trembled. Her heartbeat quickened at his unfriendly tone. "Fourth uncle, why do you look so terrible? Did something happen?" He snorted coldly and ignored her. Just 2 hours ago, he received a report from his subordinate. The underground warehouse where the hostages were kept had been massacred by a mysterious troop. It was a bloodbath because only a few soldiers survived out of the 100-odd people. Even if they survived, their injuries were very serious. Some of them even lost their heartbeats on the way to the hospital before they could be rescued. The scene was a mess with blood flowing like a river. It was said that there were not many traces of a struggle. It could be said that the 100-odd people were wiped out in a second. As for the 2 hostages, they were naturally taken away and there was no news of them. Mu Lianjue was so angry that he almost had a heart attack. In a fit of rage, he scolded his subordinates harshly. He had sent 3 batches of troops to guard the place, but they were all taken away. He was so angry that he could not speak. Not long after, there was another piece of news. It was said that the 2 children got into a car and left first. There was no news of the 5 cars of troops sent to chase after them. They followed the tracks on the road and found signs of a car crash at a remote cliff. They speculated that it had been hit and fell off the cliff. It was hard to tell what had happened in the dark of the night. They only knew that the battle seemed to be fierce along the way, but the 2 children were nowhere to be seen. They had sent more men to continue tracking them, but there was still no sign of them. Mu Lianjue's usually calm face showed a rare hint of anxiety. He was burning with anxiety. These 2 children were the biggest bargaining chips in his hands. If he lost these 2 chess pieces, it could be said that he had lost everything. Life or death depended on a single thought. Mu Lianjue's posture as if he were facing a formidable enemy startled Mu Wanru. She leaned forward slightly and was about to ask him how things were going when the slight movement affected the wound on her abdomen, causing her to grimace in pain. However, he suddenly thought of something. Mu Wanru was startled, and her hand slowly moved to her lower abdomen. It was extremely flat. Moreover, the sharp pain from her stomach caused her expression to change drastically. What happened? She gently placed her palm on her abdomen, but she could no longer feel the new life jumping around. In the past, when she touched her belly, she could feel the little life inside. But now, it was like a dead pool of water, without any response. Where's the child? Could it be, child? A look of panic suddenly flashed across Mu Wanru's face. She was so anxious that she couldn't sit still. Mu Lianjue glanced at her and knew what she was thinking. He expressionlessly asked, "Children?" "It's gone. The child is gone." Mu Wanru was stunned as if she had been struck by lightning. "Yes. Not only the child, but your womb has also been removed." In order to save her, the doctor had no choice but to remove her uterus. Of course, the child was miscarried. Mu Wanru's eyes widened in shock. Her whole face had a strange feeling of emptiness. It was so hard to get the chance to be a mother, but now, it was gone. Chapter 1231. Heh, she suddenly let out a few dry laughs. In her lifeless eyes, there was a bit of grief, a bit of sorrow, but more than that, there was a boundless darkness. As she laughed, her laughter turned into sobs. She clutched her clothes tightly as bean-sized tears rolled down her cheeks uncontrollably. For some reason, when Mu Wanru found out that the child in her womb was gone, her heart sank. When she first found out that she was pregnant, she hated the new life in her womb so much that she could not wait for it to disappear without a trace. She did not like this child. Because this child could not bring her any benefits, she hated this new life that came out of nowhere. However, for the past 2 months, she could feel that the little life in her womb was growing tenaciously. How magical was this? Subconsciously, a trace of maternal instinct was awakened. She was no longer thinking of strangling this miracle of life in her belly. She wanted to give birth to this child and keep it. She wanted to keep her in Aaron's bloodline and raise them. At that time, she suddenly realized that she more or less had some feelings for Aaron. At least, after Aaron was assassinated by Mu Lianjue, she hid under the blanket and cried bitterly for a few nights because of this matter. Now that she found out that the child was gone, she felt as if all the strength in her body had been sucked out. All of a sudden, she understood how Yunshursher felt. The child in her womb had once stimulated her maternal instinct. However, the moment she lost her child, that heart-wrenching pain made her instantly understand what kind of state Yunshursher was in as a mother. It must be very painful. It must be even more painful than her. She finally understood what it was like to be a mother. Sometimes, people could be so cheap. When they had it, they did not know how to cherish it. Once they lost it, they regretted it. When they wanted to cherish it, there was no chance at all. Why? Why do you care about that bastard in your womb? Mu Lianjue sneered as soon as he said that. Haven't you always wanted to abort this child? This time, your wish is granted. Mu Wanru lowered her head and looked at her flat stomach in disbelief. Her pale face was as if it had been brushed with a layer of white powder. She widened her eyes without blinking and a few drops of tears fell in a daze. Aaron's gentle words suddenly rang in her ears. Come with me. I'll bring you far away from all this trouble. Memories flashed before her eyes like a revolving lantern. She opened her eyes. Aaron seemed to be standing in front of her and slowly spreading his palm to her. Don't worry, I'll work very hard to earn money to support the family. Wanru. The child in your womb is our child. I'm willing to acknowledge it. I'm. Deep in my heart, What about you? Are you willing to give birth to him? Chapter 1232. Wanru, I love you with all my heart. Although I can't give you wealth, I'll work hard and use my hands to create a stable life for you. Wanru, I love you with all my heart and have never changed. For you, I entered the Mu group. For you, I've done so many evil things for you, but now, you're leaving me. Wanru, is your heart so hard? Aaron's affectionate eyes were still lingering in front of her. However, in the next second, the scene of him falling to the wall and dying after being shot flashed across her mind. She suddenly broke down and covered her eyes, wailing loudly. Ah! Don't die. A voice in her heart screamed in despair. Aaron, don't die, don't leave me. She curled her body into a ball all of a sudden and started crying in despair and helplessness. Only now did she suddenly realize that she was wrong. So completely wrong. She should not have pushed him away back then. She should have listened to him then. She did not want wealth, nor did she want to worry about food and clothing. She really did not want to live such a frightening life anymore. Looking back, her life was neither long nor short, but it seemed that Alan was the only one who truly loved her and protected her without any complaints or regrets. When they were at the welfare center, the children loved her because she shared her snacks and clothes with them. When they returned to the Mu family, Mu Xing doted on her because she had stolen Yunshirshi's identity. All along, she had been an imposter. If not for this identity, why would he dote on her so much? Aaron, on the other hand, was willing to sacrifice silently for her. He even wanted to bring her far away from trouble and escape far away. At that time, he said to her, I'll bring you away. Let's leave this place and live an ordinary life. Even if we don't have great wealth, I'll do my best for your happiness. However, she missed out on such a man who was so devoted to her. At that time, she was greedy for wealth and glory. At that point, she had nowhere to retreat and could not let go. She was indignant, so she did not listen to his advice at all. With so many opportunities, she was perhaps only one step away from happiness. What about now? She was so tired. So tired. All the time, he was trembling with fear and trepidation. She didn't want to live like this anymore. But now, it was too late for regrets. There was no medicine for regret in this world, nor was there a second chance. She didn't know what kind of life awaited her. Did Mu Xing see through her identity? Knowing that she had colluded with Mu Lianjue to poison his medicine and kept the truth from him for years, he must hate her. She was more afraid that he would be disappointed in her than hate her. Mu Xing had always treated her as his own daughter, yet she had plotted against him out of greed for wealth and glory. God, she was really ruthless. Now, she really felt like she had fallen into a bottomless abyss. The child was gone, and her life was in Mu Lianjue's hands. Her life was in danger. She suddenly yearned for an ordinary life. Even if she didn't have power or wealth, if she could have a man who loved her and a warm little family, it seemed so extravagant to her now. She clearly had a chance. She also once had a man who loved her deeply without any complaints or regrets. Chapter 1233. Initially, when the child was still around, she still had a sliver of hope in her heart. However, when she learned that she had lost her child with Alan, her heart seemed to have been torn open with a bloody hole, and she fell into the endless darkness. Mu Wanru was filled with regret. Clutching her aching heart, she cried heartbreakingly. I'm sorry, she whimpered. At this moment, she really regretted everything she had done from the bottom of her heart. I'm sorry, she repeated it 1,000 times in her heart, clutching her heart as tears streamed down her face. She was wrong. She should not have slandered Yunshirsher as a thief for the sake of fighting for affection. She was wrong. She should not have stolen her jade and replaced her identity for a moment of greed. She was wrong. She should not have schemed everywhere for glory and wealth. She was wrong. She should not have used unscrupulous means to harm Mu Xing in order to achieve her goal. She was really wrong. She should not have pushed Aaron away. That man who loved and protected her with his life. That man who appeared in her life and once revered her as a treasure. Woo 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 woo, Mu Wanru wailed at the top of her lungs. Having lost her flesh and blood, she was instantly disheartened. It was as if her entire life was bleak. Even breathing was so tiring. Mu Lianjue was frustrated. What are you crying for? What's there to cry for? Didn't you always not want this child? Isn't it just as you wished now? Mu Wanru looked up with reddened eyes. Her lips trembled violently as she shook her head, unable to utter a coherent sentence. Woo woo woo, she only cared about crying. She was so sad that she was like an orphan abandoned by the world. Mu Lianjue was so upset that his phone rang at the wrong time. He stood up abruptly and said, "Useless B***tch, do you know that you only know how to cry? My plan has been ruined by you." What? Those 2 children have been kidnapped. Mu Lianjue paused and looked at her with sharp eyes. Mu Wanru, oh, Mu Wanru, my great cause has been ruined by you. Mu Wanru was stunned, but it was as if something had suddenly burst out from her heart. Her face paled, and she smiled miserably in relief. Hee hee, hee hee, hee hee. Lunatic. Mu Lianjue swung his arm and left. Mu Wanru looked out of the window expressionlessly. There seemed to be something burning in her heart, turning into a pile of withered ashes. There was no trace of life on her face. Alan, I was wrong. Her eyes were empty as she muttered, "What glory and wealth. It's all fake, all fake. Only you are real, so, can you come back? Come back and accompany me, okay? I'm all alone now. The child is gone. You're gone too. What do I have left? I should have left with you back then. I should have gone far away with you, away from all these troubles. Why was I so foolish back then? What's so good about glory and wealth?" Memories flew. When they first met in university, Alan stood in front of her with his head lowered and a hint of shyness on his face. "Hello, I'm Hanimin." Hanimin was his name. During her 4 years in university, he had always been by her side silently, protecting her without making a sound. Perhaps, in his world, it was just as he said, being by her side was the happiest thing in his life. Chapter 1234. After graduation, she joined Dishing Financial Group and became the head of the Human Resources Department. He also joined Mu Group and became Mu Yaja's special assistant. All this time, he only had eyes for her. Why was this man so stupid? Mu Wanru suddenly sat up straight and looked out of the window. It was dawn, and the sun was rising from the east. However, her heart was still trapped in the darkness and could not wake up. Her heart was really dead. There was no more life in it. Mu Wanru lowered her head with empty eyes. The tears in her eyes seemed to have dried up, and not a single drop would flow out. She suddenly became ruthless and pulled off the tubes, needles, and respirators on her body. Then, she turned over and got off the bed. It was as if she could no longer feel pain. Even if her wound was affected and blood seeped out and flowed down her clothes all the way to her thighs, she seemed to be numb and could no longer feel the pain from her body. Mu Wanru stumbled a few steps and her body swayed. She supported herself against the wall and slowly walked toward the washroom. She walked into the washroom and looked at the mirror. She looked haggard and disheveled. Especially her eyes, there was no color of life in them. At that moment, she actually had some illusions in front of her eyes. In the mirror, Alan and her were facing each other. The tenderness on his handsome face almost made her fall into it. "Wanru, come with me, okay? Let's go far away together and live a happy and ordinary life. Okay? Is that okay? Is that okay?" He asked gently over and over again. Mu Wanru's tears fell. She could not help but reach out to him. When her fingertips touched the mirror, it was as if she could feel the warmth of his hand. "Okay." Mu Wanru smiled sweetly. Her eyes were so gentle that it seemed as if tears were about to drip out. She suddenly put her face against the mirror longingly as if she was snuggling in his arms. Her weak voice could not help but murmur, "Alan, I was wrong. I really know that I was wrong. Don't leave me. I'm the one who hurt you. I'm sorry. Forgive me, okay?" Mu Wanru cried sadly. "Alan, I was wrong. Forgive me, okay? Take me away, okay? Fool." Alan smiled, his handsome eyes overflowing with soft light. "Give me your hand, I'll take you away." Don't be afraid, I will protect you, forever," Mu Wanru smiled sadly. Her face finally regained some warmth as she nodded heavily. "Yes. Fourth Master, a few subordinates have sent news that the two children have not been found yet, but it is very likely that they have met with misfortune." "What do you mean?" Mu Lianjue narrowed his eyes and gripped the phone tightly. On the road where the child was kidnapped, there was a car accident. The oil tank leaked and exploded. When we arrived, the car had already fallen off the cliff. When we were salvaging the wreckage, we found traces of a chase along the road. He must have gone through a battle. The car fell off a cliff? Mu Lianjue's eyes widened in surprise. "Yes. Then, what are the chances of the two children surviving?" "With a 0% chance of survival, the chances of survival are extremely slim. That area is surrounded by mountains. Once you fall off the cliff, there's no chance of survival." "How can you be sure that they fell off the cliff?" "Even if they didn't fall off the cliff, they would have to pass through a forest where wild beasts roam. Plus, it's very cold in the middle of the night. The chances of survival are even slimmer." Chapter 1235. Mu Lianjue snorted. "Whether they're dead or alive, hurry and find those two children. I want to see them, dead or alive." "Yes, Fourth Master." He suddenly thought of something and asked, "Also, is there any news from the Mu family?" "No, Fourth Master. Mu Yaja doesn't seem to know about this and thinks that the children are in your hands." "Very good. Report to me immediately if there's any news from the Mu family." "Yes. I'll keep an eye on it. This morning at 9:30 a.m. Proceed as planned." "Yes, Fourth Master." Mu Lianjue hung up the phone and walked into the ward. The moment he opened the door, he was greeted by the smell of blood. Frowning, he walked to the bed, but there was no one there. He had only been gone for about 10 minutes. How did she disappear? His gaze fell on the scattered needles and tubes on the bed. His eyes suddenly caught sight of the blood stains on the snow-white bedsheet. What kind of trouble did that D*MN woman create for him again? He followed the bloodstains on the floor and walked to the bathroom door. The thick smell of blood almost overwhelmed him. He frowned and pushed the door, but it seemed to be locked from the inside. "Mu Wanru, are you in there?" He shouted, but there was no response. He held his breath and focused, only to hear a strange sound coming from the bathroom. Splash. 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 It seemed to be the sound of flowing water. Startled, he did not think much of it. He lifted his leg and kicked the door wide open. Bang! The fragile door was on the verge of collapsing. Mu Lianjue strode in. Just as he entered, he saw Mu Wanru lying beside the bathtub. She was holding a fruit knife and ruthlessly cutting her arms, wrists, and thighs. He was stunned and stood rooted to the ground. Mu Wanru's entire arm was covered in wounds and was badly mutilated. The bathtub was filled with water, and her wrists were soaked in the water, causing pools of blood to ripple in the water. She still did not know the pain and continued to stab herself. Her entire body was in a numb state, as if she could no longer feel pain. It was almost masochistic. It was not purely to scare people, but to really cut with force. Blood flowed out and dyed the snow-white hospital gown red. From afar, it looked like he had been fished out from a blood pool. "What are you doing?" Alarmed, Mu Lianjue walked over and questioned her harshly. Previously, when Mu Wanru woke up, her condition was not very good. When she found out that her child was lost, he could tell that her mental state was a little abnormal, but he didn't take it to heart. And now he was hiding here to torture himself. Could it be that the loss of the child was such a heavy blow to her? Mu Lianjue rushed over and grabbed her hand to stop her. What are you doing? Mu Wanru froze and raised her head abruptly. The moment her empty eyes saw him, they were instantly tainted with a hint of viciousness and viciousness. It's you. Her sudden roar made him confused. What do you mean? Chapter 1236. Mu Lianjue had been in the military when he was young. Although he was getting on in years, he still had some experience in martial arts. He snatched the fruit knife from her hand and kicked it far away, easily subduing her. Are you crazy? Are you trying to kill yourself and bring me bad luck? Mu Lianjue roared and pushed her to the side. Mu Wanru's body swayed, and she staggered before falling on her back beside the toilet bowl. She looked up, and her gaze was as sharp as a poisonous arrow as it ruthlessly pierced him. Who else could it be if not you? It's all your fault, you killed my child. That's my own flesh and blood, and it's all your fault. Give him back to me, give him back to me. Mu Wanru screamed at him at the top of her lungs. She got up from the floor like a madwoman and pounced on him again with bared fangs and brandished claws. He gave her a slap, but she did not seem to feel pain at all. Like a malicious spirit that had crawled out of hell, she pounced on him. You lunatic. Mu Lianjue gripped her hand tightly. His eyes narrowed dangerously. Mu Wanru, don't play the fool here. I won't fall for your tricks. You ruined all my plans, and I haven't settled the score with you yet. Why? Do you think that I won't do anything to you if you play the fool? He paused for a moment before saying coldly, besides, am I the one who killed your child? No. You'd better get to the bottom of this. Who is the one who killed your child? Mu Wanru smiled sinisterly like a vengeful spirit. Who else could it be if not you? If not you, who else could it be? Have you forgotten? His face was sullen. It's Mu Chen. If he didn't shoot you, you wouldn't have been able to save your child. To be precise, it's Mu Chen who killed your child, do you understand? Mu Chen, it's him, it's Mu Chen. Mu Wanru stared blankly and muttered like a madwoman, Mu Chen, it's him who killed my child, it's him. She suddenly grabbed her hair with a ferocious expression and pulled it hard. It's him. He killed my child. Ha ha ha. I want him to pay with his life. I want him to pay with his life. The medical team rushed over. As soon as the nurse went up to her, Mu Wanru scratched her with her hand. Unexpectedly, she scratched the nurse's face. Don't come over. Don't touch me. You all want to harm me, don't you? Scram! Mu Wanru shouted. She looked like she had lost her mind, as if she had gone crazy. Everyone looked at each other. They knew that Mu Wanru must have suffered a huge blow from losing her child, which caused her to fall into a deranged state. They had to stabilize the patient's emotions first before proceeding with further treatment. When the nurse brought over a stun baton, everyone pounced on her and held her by the shoulders to control her. Mu Wanru was still struggling, her hands flailing wildly. A doctor walked over and took out the stun baton. She shuddered violently and convulsed all over before collapsing to the ground. Before she fainted, she still gritted her teeth and muttered, Mu Chen, it's you, it's you, it's you. Mu Wanru was then transferred to the emergency room for rescue. After this farce, Mu Lianjue only felt unlucky. He cursed and ordered, watch her carefully. With that, he left. Chapter 1237. At dawn, the sun rose from the east. In the rainforest, the dew was heavy, and the cold moisture invaded his body. Yu felt that his joints were stiff and cold. From time to time, the howls of wild beasts could be heard in the forest. Mu Chen held a dagger in one hand and a torch in the other. He walked in front to explore the path and cut off the vines that obstructed their path. Lisa walked at the back and looked around vigilantly from time to time. Mu Chen muttered, how much longer until we can leave this place? It's not far. Yu felt a little weak. He was so tired that he felt like he was going to collapse at any time. He had not rested well for 2 days and 2 nights. He had overdrawn his strength for a long time and had not eaten or drunk anything for a day and night. He was hungry and cold. His physical condition had hit rock bottom. Mu Yichen comforted him. Soon, we can leave this place soon. Yu Yu suddenly stopped in his tracks. His breathing was a little rapid. Lisa walked forward and carried him on her back without a word. Yu Yu was stubborn. He was reluctant at first, but now that he was exhausted, he did not have any strength left to struggle. He did not struggle too much and simply let her carry him. Thank you. He lowered his voice and said awkwardly. Lisa said expressionlessly, You're my master. In other words, it was her responsibility to protect him. It was also her job. Yu Yu pursed his lips. This girl was really stubborn. She was like a cold machine that meticulously followed the program settings and did not know fatigue. Did she not feel tired? The three of them shuttled through the forest. Although Lisa carried Yu Yu on her back, she was physically strong. She was wearing a combat uniform that was filled with lead. She was much heavier than Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen combined. Therefore, she did not feel tired. On the other hand, Xiao Yichen's footsteps gradually slowed down, perhaps because he was injured. At this moment, there was a sudden rustling sound coming from the forest ahead. Mu Yichen was startled and somewhat frightened by the sound. Just as he was about to step forward to investigate, Lisa suddenly stopped him and shushed him, indicating that he should not act rashly. In the silence, in the dark forest, 2 pairs of yellow and sharp eyes suddenly flashed slightly in the dense bushes. Then, 2 creatures that looked similar to wolves and dogs slowly walked out from the dense forest. 2 pairs of sharp eyes stared at them like tigers eyeing their prey. What is this? Mu Yichen could not help but feel suffocated. Lisa narrowed her eyes. After examining the 2 creatures in front of her, she suddenly said, Wolves. Wolf? Mu Yichen was secretly frightened. They seemed to have encountered a situation that they did not want to happen. Yu Yu also frowned and sized them up. However, he said, No, they are something fiercer than wolves. He had read about them in the animal encyclopedia before. They were definitely not wolves. Lisa frowned slightly. When she heard this, she could not help but take a small step back. Yu Yu added in a deep voice behind her. These are 2 jackals. Jackals, there was an idiom called jackals, wolves, tigers, and leopards. Thus, it was obvious that jackals and wolves were ferocious. Usually, they hunted in pairs, which was very rare among wild beasts. In fact, there were always some people who confused jackals and wolves. In fact, jackals and wolves were not wolves. They were much smaller than wolves. Chapter 1238. They usually hunted in groups and were very alert. Their sense of smell was especially developed, and they were most active in the morning and evening. Jackals and wolves were very ferocious, and they liked to chase. After discovering their prey, they would gather together to hunt. In ancient times, there was a legend that said jackals were the nemesis of tigers. An individual jackal's attack power was slightly lower than a wolf's, but a pack of jackals was more tenacious than a pack of wolves. Different packs of jackals would cooperate to attack tigers and leopards. There were no racial differences, which greatly increased the survival ability of jackals. 2 jackals walked out of the bushes side by side. A pair of gloomy eyes stared at the 3 intruders standing in front of them who had invaded their territory. From time to time, they would bare their teeth and let out eerie and terrifying howls. Lisa and Mu Yichen didn't move. Jackals loved to chase their prey. They especially liked to gather their companions to surround their prey and then eat them. When she was on a mission in the past, Lisa had also been surrounded by jackals. But at that time, she was different. She was fully armed. Even if she was in a pack of jackals, she could easily kill her way out with a rocket launcher. But now, it was different. She had already run out of ammunition. Wait. Lisa suddenly remembered that there were still 2 bullets in the pistol. She looked at the 2 jackals in front of her vigilantly. Her hand slowly reached to her waist, grabbed the pistol, and pulled it out. Retreat. She lowered her voice and ordered. Mu Yichen glanced at her. He carefully looked at the two jackals that were full of aggression and slowly retreated. Woo! The wolf let out a warning whimper and suddenly raised its neck. The wolf's howl echoed in the empty mountain forest, as if it was summoning the pack and calling for companions. Lisa suddenly pulled out her gun and shot. The bullet hit the head of one of the jackals. Blood splattered. It was a headshot in an instant. It was terrifyingly accurate. Without waiting for the other jackal to react, Lisa suddenly reloaded and shot at the other jackal's head. Bang! However, jackals were famous for their agility. The moment the bullet left the chamber, it reacted quickly. Poof! The bullet missed by a few millimeters and hit its chest. It howled and fell to the ground. Its limbs twitched violently as it kept struggling. Mu Yichen immediately went forward and almost didn't give it any chance to struggle. He grabbed its head with one hand and broke its head. The jackal let out a whimper and quickly stopped breathing. It was dead. Yu Yu's heart calmed down, but he felt an inexplicable sense of uneasiness. He still remembered the introduction to jackals in the encyclopedia. Jackals and wolves were social animals. Most of them were strong and cunning leaders who led one or several families to gather temporarily. This meant that there were more than 2 jackals and wolves in this area. Next, his guess was quickly confirmed. Mu Yichen stood up and suddenly heard a rustling sound not far away. He turned his head abruptly and looked over, only to see several pairs of yellow eyes flickering in and out of the bushes. It was a pack of jackals. Oh no. Yu Yu had a bad feeling and his heart trembled. Mu Yichen slowly retreated and stayed close to Lisa. He frowned vigilantly. According to his estimation, there were about a dozen jackals surrounding them. Chapter 1239. In the darkness, the fire from the torches dazzled their eyes. The strong light created a huge visual barrier for them and scared the wolves back a little. Taking advantage of their short and sluggish reaction, Mu Yichen growled, "Run." Lisa carried Yu Yu on her back and turned to run with Mu Yichen. The wolves caught up with them very quickly. Lisa carried Yu Yu on her back but still ran very fast. In her fear, all her potential was stimulated and her movements were as swift as an agile leopard. Mu Yichen didn't show any signs of weakness and ran very fast. In his panic, he accidentally tripped on the broken branches on the ground and fell to his knees. Lisa heard the commotion and turned her head around. She saw a jackal pouncing towards Mu Yichen with its fangs bared and claws brandished. She took a step forward and swung her fist at its head. A woo! The jackal was sent flying by the punch and rolled a few times on the ground. It stood up abruptly with a flash of fear in its eyes. Following that, it glared at Lisa and panted. Its greedy saliva dripped down its sharp fangs. It knew how dangerous Lisa was and didn't dare to act rashly. It panted heavily and tried to take a step forward from time to time, sharpening its knife. Mu Yichen was shocked and stood up abruptly. He saw that Lisa's knuckles were dripping with blood. Just now, in a moment of desperation, she didn't think much and swung her fist over. She hit the jackal's head, but her fist met its teeth. Her skin and flesh immediately split open. "Are you okay?" Mu Yichen looked guilty. Lisa didn't say anything and held Yu Yu with one hand and Mu Yichen's hand with the other. She turned around and ran. Behind him, the jackals and wolves continued to eye him covetously. As Mu Yichen ran, he swept the torch in his hand at them in an attempt to intimidate them. However, he was wrong about one thing. Wild beasts were afraid of fire, but the fire they were afraid of was the kind that spread over a large area and spread quickly. The torches in people's hands did not have much of an effect on them. If the animals are determined to attack you, the torch itself is useless. Sometimes the animals feel threatened and take measures to fight back. For example, if you hold a torch at night, you are more likely to be attacked by poisonous snakes in the grass. Therefore, the jackals were not afraid of the torch in his hand. Or perhaps, they were really hungry and had a strong desire to attack. Yu Yu lowered his head and looked at Lisa's hand. It was covered in blood. He could not help but frown. Lisa ran as fast as she could, but no matter how fast she was, she couldn't match the speed of the jackals. A jackal pounced on her and pushed her to the ground. Yu Yu was thrown to the side. Mu Yichen hurriedly reached out and grabbed his hand. However, in the next second, Yu Yu felt the ground under his feet sink in. It was a trap. He shouted in his heart, but it was too late. His whole body fell down. Mu Yichen held his arm tightly, but he couldn't withstand the weight of his falling body. The two of them rolled down the hole together. Lisa was shocked when she saw this. The jackal that pounced on her pressed down on her shoulders with its paws. Its stinky breath assaulted her nostrils and its saliva dripped onto her face. Its pair of eyes stared at her fiercely. Chapter 1240. She gripped its neck tightly, grabbed its upper and lower jaws, and twisted it with all her might. The jackal howled in pain and struggled to get away from her. Lisa stood up while panting heavily. She pulled out a machete from her waist belt and glanced warily at the pack of wolves that surrounded her. A jackal that was standing at the head of the pack suddenly pounced on her. She held the machete in her hand and swung it fiercely, piercing through its throat. Perhaps this scene was enough to intimidate the pack of wolves behind her. They were frightened by her violent actions and retreated a few steps. Their bloodshot eyes were filled with fear. Lisa walked over and choked the throat of the wolf that she had just pierced through. She raised the Malaysian saber in her hand high up and beheaded it with a single stroke. Then, she kicked its head into the pack of wolves. The pack of wolves let out sorrowful and frightened howls. This jackal was their leader. Now that the pack of wolves had lost their leader, they naturally lost their will to fight. In the blink of an eye, they scattered like birds. Lisa walked to the entrance of the cave, picked up the flashlight, and shone it into the cave. It was dark and cold in the cave. Yu Yu raised his head in a sorry state. He propped himself up with both arms and groped around. Then, he heard a creaking sound and felt a sharp pain in his arm. His face instantly contorted in pain. He groaned a few times and struggled to pull his arm out. It was caught by a trap. The sharp teeth had bitten into his flesh. Fortunately, the trap was not big, so the wound was not very serious. Yu Yu took a few deep breaths. His other hand groped around in the darkness and finally touched a cold arm. He quickly pushed aside the pile of withered grass and struggled to help Mu Yichen up. When Yu Yu fell into the cave earlier, his feet stepped on the pit, so his body landed first. The ground of the cave was covered with a thick layer of grass. Therefore, other than a few bruises on his body, he was fine. The moment Mu Yichen fell into the cave, he instinctively grabbed Yu Yu's arm. His head was facing down, and the moment he fell, his head hit the rock wall. Therefore, his consciousness was a little muddled. The flashlight shone down. Yu Yu raised his head and saw Lisa asking, "How are you?" "I'm fine." He turned his head and gently patted Mu Yichen's cheek. Bro. How are you?" Mu Yichen slowly opened his eyes and hissed in pain. He rubbed the spot where he had been hit earlier and felt a sticky trace of blood. His head was broken and blood was seeping out. Amid the pain, Mu Yichen sobered up a little. Yu Yu said angrily, You. Don't you know that this is dangerous?" "Yes." "Idiot. Can't you?" Yu Yu was exasperated. Mu Yichen was stunned, but he quickly understood the meaning of his words. Yu Yu was angry. When he fell into the trap, Mu Yichen clearly had the chance to let go, but he grabbed his arm tightly and did not let go. Was he an idiot? Did he not know that he was in more danger than him? Mu Yichen did not think so much. It was almost an instinctive reaction. He only thought that no matter what happened, he had to protect his younger brother until the last moment. He could not leave him behind. Lisa looked down and asked, "What happened? Are you hurt?" "Yes, I'm a little hurt." Chapter 1241. Mu Yichen immediately took out the dagger tied to his thigh and poked it between his teeth. After much effort, Yu Yu's arm was finally free. Lisa threw a bottle of medicine for emergencies. Mu Yichen immediately grabbed Yu Yu's arm and applied the medicine to his wound. Yu Yu couldn't stand the pain and couldn't help but groan a few times. His shoulders heaved up and down uncontrollably, and his scalp was numb. It hurts a little. Bear with it. Mu Yichen didn't stop what he was doing. After the bleeding stopped completely, he pulled up the hem of his clothes, tilted his head, and used his mouth to pick up a corner. He tore off a piece of cloth and skillfully bandaged the wound. Yu Yu bit the end of the cloth and tied a dead knot. Immediately, he collapsed next to Ling Moli, panting heavily. Lisa stood at the entrance of the cave and observed for a while. It was a very new trap. It was probably set up not long ago. The hole wasn't deep, but it was about 5 or 6 meters deep. It would be difficult to climb out with bare hands. Lisa said, "Wait for me." With that, she turned and left. Yu Yu leaned against the rock wall. His wound wasn't serious, but it was very cold in the cave. His blood coagulated, and his wounds seemed to be frozen. It was excruciatingly painful. Yu Yu's physical strength was almost exhausted. He sat in a daze and didn't have any strength left. Mu Yichen looked around. It was probably a trap used to catch animals. He sat down next to Yu Yu and pulled up his sleeve, but it was already sticky with blood. When he fell on the ground, there was probably a broken arrow at the spot where he fell. At this moment, one end of the broken arrow was inserted into his arm. Along the way, he tried his best to endure the pain. It wasn't until he pulled up his sleeve that he realized that the wound was already bleeding profusely. He absent-mindedly recalled the soul-stirring scene just now, and his emotions were unable to calm down for a long time. If Lisa had not turned around and saved him, the wolf would have bitten his throat in the next second. Yu Yu was shocked when she saw the wound on his arm. What happened? It's nothing. It's just a small injury. He sat up with difficulty, held the dagger in his hand, and used the dagger to cut a hole in his clothes. He carefully tore his clothes and pulled them down to his shoulders. He examined the wound and looked at the half of the arrowhead that was still stuck in the wound. He bit his lip and used the knife to draw a cross on the wound. He grabbed the arrowhead and pulled it out forcefully. Blood spurted out. Mu Yichen wiped off the blood on his face. Looking at the heart of the arrow, he couldn't help but frown deeply. He was worried that the arrowheads were poisoned. This forest was probably frequented by hunters. Many hunters would smear poison on their arrowheads to numb the nerves of wild animals. After hesitating for a moment, he gritted his teeth and kissed the wound. After a while, he turned his head and spat out a mouthful of blood. He frowned and persistently kissed the wound again. Then, he tore off the cloth on his body and quickly wrapped the wound firmly. When he raised his head, he suddenly met Yu Yu's shocked eyes. What's wrong? Yu Yu was stunned for a long time. It was not because of anything else, but because Mu Yichen's skills were skillful and swift. Could it be that he often got injured like this? Stupid brother, do you often get injured? Mu Yichen was stunned for a moment before he slowly nodded. Okay. Why? Chapter 1242. In the past, when I was in the special training camp, I often got injured when I was out in the wild. Yu Yu felt as if his heart had been stabbed. His heart ached for him. Alright, don't let your imagination run wild. I'm used to it. Mu Yichen chuckled and reached out to rub his hair. Yu Yu grabbed his hand unhappily. Promise me. You're not allowed to get injured again. Yu Yu stared into his eyes and said word by word. Mu Yichen was stunned. He was a little surprised. Suddenly, he saw undisguised love in Yu Yu's eyes. His heart warmed. All right. I promise you. Okay. Yu Yu leaned back and sat against the jagged stone wall. His back was rubbed against the uneven stone wall. He adjusted the angle of his back and felt better. He was a little tired. He took the opportunity to rest and recuperate. When he closed his eyes, he suddenly heard the sound of someone getting up. He opened his eyes in surprise, only to see a large coat covering her head, blocking all of his vision. Yu waved his hand in an attempt to pull it away, but a strong hand held him back. "It's cold here." "Don't catch a cold," Mu Yichen said. "Aren't you cold?" "I'm not cold." Mu Yichen sneered. "This is nothing." "Really?" Yu was a little doubtful. Mu Yichen pursed his lips. "I'm really not cold. In the winter, I can swim a few times in the lake." But in reality, he was cold too. The cold in the cave was wet and cold. It was so cold that his scalp was numb. When he frowned, he felt that his scalp was almost frozen. After a while, Lisa found some vines and hung them down the stone wall. "Climb up," she shouted from above. Mu Yichen stood up. The other end of the rattan was tied tightly to the tree by Lisa. "You go first," Mu Yichen said to Yu. Yu shook her head tiredly. "Go up first, then pull me up." "Okay, wait for me." Mu Yichen grabbed onto the vines with both hands and kicked off the stone wall with the tips of his feet. In no time at all, he climbed up. Turning around, he shouted into the cave, "Yu, hurry up and come up." However, he seemed to have forgotten that Yu's hand was injured. Even if Yu was not injured, he would not be able to climb up with his pathetic arm strength. Yu tried for a while, enduring the pain of being cut by the vines, and fell down several times. I think I don't have any strength left." Yu's weak voice was heard. "You guys should meet up with the troops first, then think of a way to save me." Lisa frowned. Before she could say anything, Mu Yichen said anxiously, "No. I can't leave you here alone. It's safe here. I'll wait for you guys here." After a pause, Yu said helplessly, "I really don't have any strength left. I'm so tired. This place is too far from the entrance. I can't climb up at all. I'll go down and carry you." "Are you crazy?" If he carried him, he would have to bear double the weight. If it was before, he believed that Mu Yichen could do it. However, Mu Yichen was on the verge of exhaustion now. There was no way he could do it. "Brother, don't worry. It's safe here. I'll wait here for you guys to save me." Yu's voice was heard again. Mu Yichen still could not bear to see him leave. Chapter 1243. Yu continued, "Based on my estimation, this place is not far from the rendezvous point. An hour's round trip should be enough. Don't worry, brother, I can hold on. Don't worry about me." "Okay. You must wait for me." Yu smiled and ordered, "Lisa, protect my brother." "Yes, master." Lisa replied respectfully. She also felt that if they continued to drag on, the three of them would be exhausted and none of them would be able to walk out of here. While the two of them still had energy, they should quickly rendezvous with the troops. It was relatively safer for Yu to stay here. Lisa said, "Stay here and wait for me." Yu nodded. Lisa turned around and continued on their way. Mu Yichen was conflicted. However, it was indeed relatively safer for Yu to stay here. His stamina was too weak. Mu Yichen also knew that Lisa and he were on the verge of exhaustion. If they met with any accidents along the way, they would not be able to attend to them. Therefore, he gritted his teeth and looked at Yu deeply before he turned around and followed them. Yu closed his eyes and rested. At this moment, he was extremely exhausted. He knew his body's condition very well. It would be extremely difficult for him to stay here and wait for them, let alone follow them on their journey. However, no matter how slim the hope was, as long as he had a little bit of energy left, he would persevere until the very last moment. Yu wrapped himself in the jacket that Mu Yichen had left for him. The cave was cold and damp, and it was almost overwhelming. He felt that all the blood in his body seemed to have solidified, so much so that it was difficult for it to flow. Every blood capillary on his cheeks was frozen, and even the slightest change in expression made his face feel numb. He touched his face and thought that there was a layer of ice on his face. Yu Yu tried her best to keep her eyes open. She was tired and sleepy. When she was freezing, she couldn't help but curl up into a ball like a fragile shrimp in a corner. However, she couldn't resist the cold. Gradually, his eyelids became heavier and heavier. He tried his best to keep his eyes wide open, knowing that his physical strength had reached its limit. However, he could not allow himself to close his eyes. The temperature in the forest was almost 0 degrees Celsius, especially at dawn, when the chill was heavy. He raised his head and looked at the sun rising from the east, but he did not feel the slightest bit of light or heat. He sighed inwardly and felt that he couldn't go on like this. At the very least, he had to stand up and move his body. Otherwise, he would be frozen stiff and feel dizzy. It was as if he would fall unconscious in the next second. In such an environment, if he closed his eyes, he didn't know if he could wake up. Yu Yu stood up and hugged his jacket tighter. He stomped his feet on the spot and walked around the cave. The strong wind blew into the cave entrance. Due to the special structure of the trap, the wind in the cave was especially strong. It blew in like ice water pouring over one's head. Yu Yu gave up. After careful consideration, he decided to find a place where he could shelter himself from the wind for the time being. He found a corner and sat down. He raised his head and looked at the sky in a daze. At this moment, the sky was already slightly bright. Where were Xiao Yichen and Lisa now? Chapter 1244. His back was leaning against the rock wall, which was craggy and jagged. When he fell, his back had hit the sharpest part of the rock. He reckoned that it was because he had lost some weight. His back was stained with dew, and it was painful and itchy. It was as if countless ants were gnawing on his wound. He had not eaten or drunk anything for a day and a night. His throat was almost smoking from coughing. All the bad things had come together to form a hopeless situation. Yu Yu buried his face in his arms, full of hope. When he opened his eyes and looked up again, Xiao Yichen had already reached out to him from inside the cave. After passing through a large forest, there was a road that was several kilometers long. Xiao Yichen and Lisa ran and stopped on the road one after another. They tried their best to establish contact with the troops in the shortest time possible. At this time, the sun was slowly rising from the horizon. Although it was early in the morning, the temperature could not reach them, but it still drove away some of the coldness and brought about a rare warmth. Xiao Yichen's footsteps became heavier and heavier. He was in a state of overload and could collapse at any moment. His condition was worse than Yintianyo's. He was covered in injuries. Some of them were not treated in time and were already inflamed, causing excruciating pain. Even so, he didn't slow down at all. That was because Yu Yu was still waiting for him. A minute later meant a minute more danger. Lisa looked at his stiff and forbearing expression and knew that he was enduring the pain on his body. "I'll carry you," she said. Mu Yichen looked at her in surprise, but he quickly hid the surprise in his eyes and coldly said, "No." She had always respected the strong. In her eyes, Mu Yichen's willpower was shockingly strong, so her impression of him changed somewhat. Mu Yichen's throat was extremely dry. Suddenly, his legs gave way and he fell to the ground. Lisa immediately walked over and reached out to help him. Mu Yichen did not reach out his hand, though. His shoulders were heaving violently, and his breathing was rapid. Despite his efforts to restrain himself, his whole body was strangely stiff. Mu Yichen gritted his teeth and slowly stretched his body. He took a deep breath of cold air and tried to push himself up from the ground with his hand on the wall. However, when he half knelt on one knee and propped his upper body up, his vision turned black. He felt dizzy and his back was instantly covered in cold sweat. Lisa reached out to touch his forehead and was shocked to find that he had a fever. Beads of cold sweat the size of beans on his forehead and flowed down. Mu Yichen opened his eyes. His face was ghastly pale without a trace of blood. Lisa knelt on one knee on the ground and gently wiped away the cold sweat on his face. She had already guessed that the wounds on his body must have been infected. Coupled with the exhaustion of his physical strength throughout the night, this led to the fever. However, she didn't have any more medicine on her. Is it serious? She knitted her brows and asked with concern. Yu Yu had already told her to protect him, so at this moment, it was her duty to protect him. Mu Yichen bit his lips and shook his head. It's fine. As he spoke, another bean-sized bead of cold sweat rolled down his face. No matter how strong he was, his body could not deceive her eyes. Chapter 1245. When he opened his eyes again, Mu Yichen felt that the dizziness had subsided a little. He thought that his physical strength had reached its limit. He became more anxious. There was a deep sense of helplessness. How good would it be if he was a Superman? However, he was not. At that moment, he was extremely frustrated with himself for being powerless. He could not even protect his younger brother. He was so angry at himself that he could not help but punch the ground. His knuckles were bleeding. What are you doing? Lisa held his fist tightly. This idiot. Did he think that his injuries were not serious enough? Mu Yichen reached out to wipe the cold sweat off his face. He struggled to stand up. His body swayed, and his vision turned black again. His body fell forward heavily. Lisa immediately went forward and supported his center of gravity. As soon as she touched his skin, she felt a chill that seeped into her heart. The temperature of his skin was frighteningly cold. It was as if it could penetrate her clothes and freeze her blood. His clothes were all wet. Some of it was blood, while others were wet from the dew as they passed through the forest. Along the way, he had been trying to be brave. He endured his exhaustion and forced himself to walk so far. At that moment, he no longer had any energy left. Despite his physical condition, he still insisted on carrying Yu Yu. His willpower was extraordinarily tenacious. Lisa carried him on her back. Mu Yichen was half a head taller than Yu Yu. Hence, he was heavier than Yu Yu. Lisa did not have much energy left. If it was in her usual state, Mu Yichen's weight was nothing. However, at that moment, her body swayed and she almost collapsed. Mu Yichen's head rested weakly on her shoulder. His rapid breathing blew into her ears. She could still feel his strong and rapid heartbeat. Thump, 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 it was scorching hot. She supported him with all her strength and stepped on the road again. On the mountain road, the wind was biting cold. She was drenched in sweat, and when the wind blew, she felt both wet and cold. Mu Yichen's mind was in a mess. When he opened his eyes in a daze, he felt that he was being carried on someone's back. He looked down and saw Lisa's determined face. The cold wind brushed past her hair. Her messy hair intertwined with her thick and long eyelashes. Observing the side of her face from a close distance, he discovered that this girl had a face that could make people think she was a celestial being. She had a special temperament. She clearly looked so cold and arrogant, as if there was not a trace of smoke or fire on her body. The blood flowing in her body had long condensed into snow, and her bones had been cast into ice. However, one could not help but feel sorry for her. She clearly looked very unapproachable, distant, cold, and unapproachable. However, he couldn't help but feel a sense of closeness. After a long night of trekking, Lisa gradually felt that her head was heavy and her feet were light. She was not really a war machine. She was made of flesh and blood. Even living people had their limits. Hence, she could not help but slow down. Mu Yichen said weakly, Put me down. I can walk on my own, shut up. Be quiet. Lisa spat out a few words with difficulty. She was already distraught. Her legs were as heavy as lead. It was so heavy that she found it difficult to lift a step. Chapter 1246. His head felt heavy and muddled, and the scene in front of him started to drift away. Finally, she could not bear the burden anymore. Her world suddenly turned dark. Just as she was about to collapse, she vaguely saw a troop rushing toward her from the edge of her blurry vision. Lisa squinted her eyes slightly and shook her head hard, trying to get rid of the confusion in her head. Only then did she get a clearer view. Leading the way was Vermilion Bird, who was fully armed. Walking beside her was Njia. As if a stream of energy had been injected into her body, she pulled herself together and walked toward Vermilion Bird with Mu Yichen on her back. Vermilion Bird saw a girl carrying a child toward her at the end of the mountain road. Squinting her eyes and recognizing that the child was Lisa, she raised her hand. It's Lisa. Luca, send someone to get her. Yes. Luca immediately led his team and rushed over. Lisa tried her best to hold on until the last moment when Luca reached her. When his teammate picked up Xiao Yichen, her body swayed and she collapsed to the ground. Lisa. Luca squatted down in shock and carried Lisa. She opened her mouth and her eyelids fluttered a few times. Before she could say a word, she fainted. She had been holding on for so long. She was beyond her limit. Luca anxiously called out a few times. Lisa was already unconscious. When Vermilion Bird arrived, she only saw two people. Where's Yuntianyu? Luca shook his head in silence. There were only two children and one child missing. She frowned and put on her headset. Command Center, this is Vermilion Bird. Please send Yuntianyo's location. Yes. The temporary command center immediately sent the location information to her laptop. In fact, she had originally planned to meet at the bridge, but when the person did not show up, she requested the command center to send Yuntianyo's location. In the end, the reply she got was that the location signal was sometimes strong and sometimes weak. There was no signal coverage in the forest, so the location was not accurate. After Zhu Ke lost contact with Lisa, she sent people into the forest to search for her. Yuntianyo's signal frequency, however, was abnormal. By the time he arrived, his signal was already several miles away. This meant that he was heading north. Therefore, the Vermilion Bird sent people to the rendezvous point, not leaving even an inch. In the end, this was the result that he had been waiting for. When Vermilion Bird's troops arrived at the last location, they found a trap that was more than 5 meters deep. When she turned on the flashlight and shone it inside, there was no one. She only found a blood-stained coat. The centaur fished out the coat. Vermilion Bird looked at it, her face slightly sullen. What's going on? Gong Jie's voice came from the headset. Where is Yuntianyu? Vermilion Bird buckled her headset and replied, he's gone. Please send the location again. The location signal has been cut off. Interrupted. Vermilion Bird was slightly surprised. How is that possible? Luca said in a low voice, the chip implanted in his body is made of material that can be absorbed by the human body. If the time limit is exceeded, the chip will be absorbed by the human body. Vermilion Bird frowned and clenched her fists tightly. She turned around and coldly ordered, send more people to search for him. He's not far from here. Do a carpet search. Yes. Chapter 1247. In the hospital, Mu Yaja received a call from Li Hanlin. According to his report, Mu Yichen had returned safely. Yuntianyo's whereabouts were unknown, so they had sent more people to search for him. Mu Yaja was shocked. What happened? Because we have lost contact with the two children, we don't know what exactly happened. We'll know the details when the little master wakes up. Chairman Mu, I'm sorry. Mu Yaja hung up the phone and turned to meet Yun Shusher's expectant and inquiring gaze. Are the children back? Yes. Mu Yaja nodded and furrowed his brows. He decided to hide this matter from her for the time being. They're back safely, don't worry. They're back? Where are they? Yun Shusher's face finally regained its color. Her eyes lit up as she excitedly tried to get off the bed. Mu Yaja stopped her. I'll bring you there when you're feeling better. No. Yun Shusher's face froze for a moment before she asked suspiciously, Mu Yaja, are you lying to me just to comfort me? Actually, the children aren't back safely, right? She was a little suspicious and stared at him suspiciously. Mu Yaja said, be good. I'm not lying to you. The two children were injured and were sent to the hospital. If you want to see them, look at how haggard you are now. My heart will ache if they see you like this. Xianxia was startled. She lowered her head to take a look. Indeed, she looked a little haggard now. Have some porridge first and rest for a while. I'll bring you there when you look better, okay? Wuxia gently coaxed her. Xianxia looked at him suspiciously for a while. She did not see any trace of deceit on his face before she returned to bed unhappily. I don't feel at ease until I see the children. Have some porridge first, okay? Wuxia picked up the bowl of porridge at the side and looked at her tenderly. Ever since he rushed back to the country, he had been accompanying her for 2 days and 2 nights without sleep. As a result, there was some stubble on his chin. His originally handsome face had become thinner and more chiseled. Xianxia looked at him deeply and suddenly felt a stabbing pain in her heart. She suddenly felt that she was a little too willful. She could not sleep well due to worry. He, too, could not close his eyes. She was a mother, and he was also a father. How could he not be worried? She was worried and scared, but she could rely on him. As for him? But she had no one to talk to. He must be more tired. Tears welled up in her eyes all of a sudden. Wuxia opened the thermos flask and picked up the porridge. When he turned to look at her, he saw her guilty expression and frowned slightly. What's wrong? Wuxia. I've made you worry. Xianxia muttered weakly. She looked up and stared at him. From now on, I'll listen to you and not let my thoughts run wild. Wuxia was slightly stunned. He could not help but reach out his finger and gently scratch her nose. Silly. He picked up the spoon and said gently, I'll feed you, okay? Okay. Xianxia nodded. The porridge was sent over by the servant earlier. It was in the thermos flask and was still a little hot. Chapter 1248. Xianxia took a small bite and swallowed it. Instantly, she felt warm all over her body. Her body did not feel so cold anymore. Wuxia repeated the action until he fed her half a bowl of porridge. Xianxia said, I'm full. I can't drink any more. Drink a little more, he coaxed patiently. She could not bear with him and drank a few more mouthfuls. She had a small appetite. After she was full, she lay down gently. Wuxia stood up and walked to the bathroom. After washing up, he walked to the bed. I'm going to the office to settle something. Have a good rest and wait for me to come back. You're going to the office? Xianxia was a little dissatisfied. Is there something important? Yes, it's very important. There were some debts that he had to settle with that person. Xianxia asked, when are you coming back? I'll come back when I'm done. Xianxia pouted. That was as good as not saying anything. However, she did not say anything. She lay down on the bed obediently and smiled. I'll wait for you. Okay. Wuxia folded the bedding for her and turned to leave. A wave of darkness that could topple mountains and overturn seas swept towards him. Immediately after, he fainted. In his groggy state, he felt an inexplicable heat. It was so hot that his whole body was burning. His chest felt as though it was being burned by something, and it was swollen and painful. Yu woke up from his muddled state. He was a little confused about where he was. The headache was getting clearer. The pain was clear and intense. Somehow, his weak consciousness told him that he was still alive. After a long period of darkness, when he opened his eyes again, it was because he felt a tender little hand running amok on his face. When he woke up, he opened his eyelids and saw a small, wheat-colored hand gently stroking his eyelashes. Wow! Ah, Pa, this little brother's eyelashes are so beautiful. They're so long, just like a beautiful fan. A tender and soft voice sounded. Yu frowned slightly. She tried to open her eyelids, but her vision was still blurry. Lingling, little brother is injured. Move aside and don't disturb his rest. But father, Lingling didn't disturb little brother's rest. Father, father, why is little brother's skin so white? He looks like a child from the city. Also, little brother is very handsome, even more handsome than that Huzi in the village. Yu Yu's heart tightened, and his eyes widened in an instant. He turned his head abruptly and met the eyes of a little girl, who was looking at him with surprise. The girl was startled at first, then she leaned over and cupped his face to take a look. Yu Yu's eyes widened in shock. Seeing that he had woken up, a look of joy appeared on the little girl's face. Father, little brother is awake, little brother is awake. The little girl waved her hands happily and ran away. Yu Yu suddenly sat up on the bed. However, his movement was too big, and it affected the wound on his arm. He sucked in a breath of cold air and gently covered his arm with his trembling hand. He turned his head and looked around. What entered his eyes was a slightly backward civilian hut. Chapter 1249. The floor was paved with green stone slabs. He was lying on a four-poster wooden bed. Where was this place? He remembered that he had fallen into a trap. After he fainted, he didn't know what had happened. When he woke up, why was he in a villager's house? Yu Yu lowered his head and looked at himself. He had changed into a new set of clothes. He didn't know where the clothes came from, but they looked a little rustic. They had been washed too many times and were a size too big. His wounds had been cleaned in time, replaced with gauze, and bandaged properly. Not long after, along with the sound of hurried footsteps, an adult man led the noisy little girl to the bedside. Seeing that she had finally woken up, his face was filled with relief, but at the same time, a trace of guilt appeared. Little boy, you're awake. It's good that you're awake. It's good that you're awake. Yu Yu was instantly on guard as he sized up the man in front of him. The man was slightly older. He had dark skin and a sturdy physique. He was wearing the same clothes that had been washed too many times, and his beard was unshaven. It was obvious that he didn't take care of himself and looked a little sloppy. However, his face was calm and honest, and his entire body emitted a simple and unadorned aura. As soon as he opened his mouth, his voice was thick and hoarse. It seemed that he must be a veteran smoker. He sat by the bedside. Yu Yu sensed the deep kindness in his eyes and let down his guard. It was probably this man who had rescued him from the trap. It was also this man who had helped him bandage his wounds and change his clothes. It seemed that this man didn't have any ill intentions. Hence, he didn't have to be wary of him. Who are you? Yu Yu smiled and asked. The man smiled, then hugged the little girl, and told him the story. When I went to retrieve the trap today, I found that you had fallen into it, so I rescued you. I saw that you were injured, so I brought you back first. I saw that you were covered in blood and were seriously injured. The man's calm and hoarse voice had a strong local accent. From his long-winded narration, Yun Tianyu learned that there was a remote farm near this mountain path. The man before him was a farmer living there. He usually farmed a dozen or so mu of land and occasionally went hunting in the mountains. And the trap that he fell into was set up by him. He originally hoped to catch some wild wolves and deer, but he didn't expect that he would step on it and fall down. It was no wonder that when he woke up, this man walked over and showed such an ashamed expression to him. It was said that the farm here was called Anyang Village, a typical village in the city. Speaking of which, the villagers of Anyang Village could be considered as old natives of the capital. Because the place was remote, surrounded by mountains and rivers, far from the city center, the city government did not develop it. The main reason was that there wasn't much value in developing such a location. There were a few hundred villagers in Anyang Village. Most of them used to farm for a living. Although they weren't rich, they lived a peaceful life. A few years ago, a farmer had the whimsical idea of opening up a forest and planting fruit trees. Unexpectedly, the harvest that year was good, so the villagers of Anyang Village started planting fruit trees one after another. When this man brought him back, it was said that it caused a stir in the village. Chapter 1250. Secondly, when the man brought him back, he was covered in blood, which attracted the attention of many villagers. Some of them felt sorry for him, so they sent him some old clothes. "Little boy, why did you go to that forest? It's dangerous there are a lot of wild animals there. Where are you from? How did you end up here?" The man fired a barrage of questions at him like a machine gun. He looked young, but he did not look like a country bumpkin. His clothes were expensive, and his skin was fair and tender. He was a typical child who grew up in the city. His daughter was envious. Girls love to look good, but growing up in the countryside, his skin was tanned and rough. Seeing Yu Yu's handsome face and fair skin, she was envious. While he was unconscious, she tirelessly leaned on the bed and sized him up. She would pick up his hand and look at it, and then she would fiddle with his eyelashes. She would never get tired of playing with them. The little girl yearned for life in the city. There were always idol dramas on TV. Her dream was to get into a city university when she grew up and live in the city. The little girl fell in love with Yun Tianyu at first sight. Although she was still young and had not reached the age of first awakening of love, she actually knew how to be shy when she looked at Yu Yu. Yu Yu felt that this family was quite warm-hearted and friendly to him. They were simple and honest, and did not seem to harbor any ill intentions toward him. Moreover, his wounds were cleaned, so he still had a good impression of the man in front of him. However, when the man asked about his identity, he did not say much and only said that he lived in the city. The man asked for his parents' numbers so that he could call them and send him home. Yu Yu gave him Li Hanlan's number. The man then left the little girl at home to look after him while he went to the village to make a call. This village was very remote, so the communication system was very outdated. Not every family had such an advanced and luxurious thing like a mobile phone, nor did they have a landline. Many people would go to a small store in the village to make a call. There was a public phone there, and it was called E-Department's PHS. 1 yuan could make a call for a few minutes. It was quite worth it. When the villagers of Anyang village needed to make a call, they would go to the convenience store to make the call. Anyang village was very far away from the nearby villages and towns. Fortunately, living in this village, they did not have to worry about food and clothing. Therefore, the villagers here rarely left the village. The little girl's name was Lingling, and her full name was Zhao Linghua. She was 6 years old this year and was attending a private primary school in the village. That was what Lingling had told him. Seeing that Yu Yu had woken up, Lingling immediately started chattering non-stop. Yu Yu didn't have the energy to respond to her. He just leaned on the bed quietly and waited for the man to finish the call. After contacting Li Hanlan, he waited for Li Hanlan to come and pick him up. Yu Yu's indifference did not dampen the little girl's enthusiasm. She talked to herself and did not feel lonely. Instead, she was very happy. This was understandable. Lingling had grown up in this village, and it was rare for her to see a child from the city. Naturally, she was filled with curiosity. "Little brother, is the moon in the city big and round?" Chapter 1251. I saw on TV that there are many tall buildings in the city. They're very, very tall. They're so tall. Won't the wind blow them down? Where's your house, big brother? Do you have immortal taro pancakes at home? My mother knows how to make immortal taro pancakes. They're delicious. They're made with taro. They're sweet and crunchy. She became more and more excited as she spoke. She jumped off the bed and ran out of the door. No one knew what she was going to do. Not long after, she skipped into the room with a plate in her hands. There were a few golden taro pancakes on the plate. She handed the plate to him, raised her thick eyebrows slightly, and said with a smile, "These are my mother's immortal taro pancakes. They're very delicious. They're freshly made. Do you want to try them?" As she spoke, she took a piece and put it in her mouth. She took a big bite and began to chew. It was crunchy. Looking at her eating, it tasted exceptionally good. Yu Yu hesitated for a moment, but he was simply too hungry. He had not eaten or drunk anything for 2 days, so his stomach was rumbling with hunger. Hence, he could not care less as he picked up a piece and bit into it. Hiss, it was so sweet. It was so sweet that it stuck to his teeth. Yu Yu bit off a piece and chewed. Ling Ling was elated when she saw that he had eaten it. She asked proudly, "Is it good? Is it good?" "Yes." Yu Yu nodded politely. Although it was not his favorite flavor, he felt that it was quite tasty now that he was hungry. Ling Ling sat by his bed and ate a piece of taro pancake each. She chattered incessantly as she nibbled on the immortal taro pancake. Yu Yu would respond politely from time to time. "Do you watch TV? We have a TV at home. My father bought it in town last year." Ling Ling got off the bed and turned on the TV. Yu Yu's lips twitched when he saw it. She must have bought this second-hand TV, right? It was black and white and only about 10 inches long. When she turned it on, snowflakes fluttered in the air. This type of TV had been phased out more than 10 years ago. However, in Anyang village, it was already considered very fashionable to have such a television. There were only a few channels on the TV. At this moment, there was only the afternoon news, but Ling Ling was also watching it with relish. For her, as long as there were people moving in the screen, she would find it very interesting. Not long after, the man hurried back, but he brought some bad news. As it turned out, when he rushed over, the store was actually closed. After asking around, it turned out that the store owner had gone to town to stock up on goods. Now, it was a distance of 30 miles to town. Adding on the fact that he had to stock up on goods, he would probably only be back tomorrow. Therefore, the man said that he would settle him down for the night first. When the boss of the snack bar came back tomorrow, he would call his family. Although Yu Yu was worried, there was nothing she could do. "Then I'll have to trouble you." Yu Yu thanked him politely. The man blushed in embarrassment. "Sigh. Don't say that, I'm embarrassed. Little brother, it's good that you can forgive me. If I hadn't dug that trap, you wouldn't have fallen into it." It turned out that the man was still feeling guilty about that. Yu Yu comforted him. "It's fine. It was fine as long as he was fine." Chapter 1252. "It's okay. Don't worry about it." Yu Yu felt cold sweat in his heart. It turned out that this man was still feeling guilty about this matter. When Ling Ling heard that Yu Yu was going to stay tonight, she was so happy that she jumped 3 feet high. "Yay! Daddy is so awesome. So awesome. I'm so happy that big brother is staying at our house tonight." She was overjoyed, and a smile bloomed on her face. Children always lacked playmates, and for a child of her age, having one more playmate was the greatest joy. Moreover, in Ling Ling's eyes, Yu Yu was beautiful with fair skin and big eyes. Hence, she especially liked this handsome big brother. Yu Yu frowned slightly and ignored Ling Ling. He asked, "So in such a big village, only the convenience store has a phone that can contact the outside world?" That's right. Little brother, I'm not going to lie to you. In our village, the traffic signal is rather backward. There's a big mountain outside and a big forest in the middle. That area is under the control of the government. Plus, our village is neither big nor small. It's vast but sparsely populated. There are only a few hundred villagers in total. That's why the signal tower couldn't be built. As for the phone in the convenience store, it's quite fashionable in our village. Even so, the signal is intermittent. Hee hee. The man laughed awkwardly. His face was red and he looked a little embarrassed. Although Yu Yu was disappointed, he didn't complain. After all, this man was so nice to him. Besides, staying for one night was nothing. Hence, he nodded and said, "Okay, I'll wait and see tomorrow." The man nodded and explained carefully, "But I'm afraid that your parents will be worried about you. I'm also very anxious. But there's no other way. The village is not like the city. All the facilities are backward. It's okay. But I'll have to trouble you today." Yu Yu smiled and thanked him gracefully. The man was a little flattered. He rubbed his hands together and looked a little nervous. He suddenly laughed dryly and asked, "Are you hungry?" "No, I just ate a few pieces of taro cake." "Oh. Do you want a few more?" The man was so enthusiastic that Yu couldn't handle it. "Oh. Do you want some water?" "Okay, thank you, uncle." Yu was famous for being a sweet talker. When the man heard that, he was overjoyed. Yu was not like those children in the village who were used to being wild since they were young. But he was only 7 years old. Yu was very polite. Yu's heart was sweeter than honey. From their conversation, Yu learned that the man's name was Wuxia Xianxia and that he was an ordinary villager in the village. He owned a few acres of land behind his house and planted a few acres of wheat and vegetables. He knew how to hunt, so whenever he was free, he would hunt for game in the mountains. Occasionally, when he was lucky, he would hunt a few deer and sell their skins at the market. Usually, he would be able to fetch a good price and not have to worry about his monthly expenses. Yu's days were peaceful and comfortable. Zhao Shengjuan's wife, Li Ru, was a typical farmer's wife. Her skin was dark and rough, and her voice was a little loud. However, she was warm and friendly. It was afternoon now. The sun outside was gradually getting hotter. Chapter 1253. Lingling pulled him along and proudly introduced Yu to a few of her friends in the village. They were all young children. The oldest was 12 years old and the youngest was 7 years old. They were all immature brats. Yu, who was secretly criticizing these children in his heart, did not realize that, in the eyes of others, he was also a brat who was still wet behind the ears. When the group of children saw that a new friend had arrived, they surrounded Yu and sized him up. "Lingling, who is this guy? My father brought him back. I heard that he came from the city." "From the city?" Hearing these words, all the children's eyes shone brightly. They crowded in front of Yu and asked him curiously. "The children in the city are just like what they show on TV. Their skin is white and tender." "Hey, what's your name?" The child who spoke was called Ergo. "His name is Yu. You can call him Yu." Zhao Linghua introduced him enthusiastically. "Yu. Wow. That's a nice name. It sounds so Western. It's not as old-fashioned as my name. Yu, you're so good-looking. You look like a white porcelain doll. I heard from my father that the children in the city are all little princesses and young masters. Yu, are you a young master too?" Yu's lips twitched for a while. Zhao Linghua gently tugged at Yu's sleeve. Because she was shy, her face was red. She lowered her head slightly and said expectantly, "Little brother, do you want to play with us?" "Lingling." Li Ru pretended to be angry and said, "Little brother is injured. How can he play with you? Don't mess around. Also, have you finished the homework that the teacher gave you? You only know how to play and don't do your homework. How are you going to get into the city's schools when you grow up?" Ling made a face. "Mom, I've finished my homework. That's why I came out to play." She stuck out her tongue and turned around. Then she grabbed Yu's hand and ran out of the house. Li Ru stomped her feet in anger. In front of the door, there was a large open space. On the ground, there was a crooked drawing of a lattice with chalk. A little boy in dirty clothes was half squatting on the ground, fiddling with a small piece of tile. His pair of clear black and white eyes were fully focused in front of him. Lingling introduced the little boy as her older brother, Zhao Tianyu. The little guy was very young, no more than 7 years old, but his appearance was very delicate. His pair of phoenix eyes were especially beautiful, his white and flawless skin, and his delicate facial features were completely different from the appearance of the Zhao couple. At that time, the gossip in the village said that the Zhao couple could not have children, and this child was adopted by the Zhao couple at a high price. Usually, they worshipped him like a little ancestor. In the village, there was a saying that raising a child would help one prepare for one's old age. It was also said that there were 3 ways to be unfilial, and having no children was the worst. Therefore, the couple insisted on having a boy. Their family was also well off, so under the doting, the little guy's food and clothing were considered good among the children in the village. Later on, Zhao Linghua was born. His name was Zhao Tianyu, and his nickname was Daodu. He grew up wearing the same pants as Zhao Linghua and always played behind her. His favorite game was hopscotch. Chapter 1254. Therefore, he was not interested in the game at all. He sat at the door like an old man. The boy in front of her was full of childish nature. Even though he could not run steadily, he was very playful. He pulled Zhao Linghua and cried, pestering her to play with him. "Lingling, I'll jump first. Watch me. This time, I won't go back on my word." Lil P smiled at her, revealing a row of white teeth. Lingling said a number weakly, 8. Lil P made a sound of agreement and threw the ball with all her might. She then jumped around excitedly in the grid. Yu Yu sat at the door, resting his chin on one hand as he lazily basked in the sun. Lingling kept asking him to play with her, but Yu Yu was not very interested in this. His indifference made Lingling feel a little disappointed, so she played with Lil P listlessly. Not long after, the other children came running over one after another. The group of children started to make a ruckus. It was the sound of children arguing, quarreling, and laughing. It sounded carefree, clear, and loud. It was like a free bird, chirping non-stop, as if it didn't know exhaustion. Yu Yu looked at the children who were making a ruckus and suddenly sighed. What a group of energetic children. Not long after, the Zhao family's door was filled with people. It turned out that the villagers had come over out of curiosity to see what was going on. They had heard that Zhao Xianxia had come back from hunting in the mountains and rescued a child. When he brought the child back, he was covered in blood, scaring everyone. They did not know where the child came from and why he ran into the mountains for no reason. The mountains were so big, so they thought that the child's parents were heartless and abandoned the child. Speaking of which, among the villagers of Anyang village, many of the parents in the city were too heartless. There were a few times when human traffickers brought children from the city and lied to the honest and kind villagers that the children were abandoned by the people in the city. Most of the villagers were kind, and some of them did not have children, so they spent a lot of money to adopt the children. But in reality, they were all trafficked by human traffickers. It was just that these villagers rarely interacted with the outside world and were all natives. Therefore, word spread like wildfire. The villagers' impression of the people in the city was that they were rich and respectable. There was also no lack of heartless parents who didn't even want their own children and casually threw them away. Therefore, some people thought that Yu Yu's parents abandoned her, so they asked, "Yu Yu, do your parents abandon you? Is that why he threw you up the mountain?" No, Yu Yu answered honestly, but did not say anything else. But when those people saw that it was a child, they teased him and pretended to be serious as they said, "You have been deceived. My parents definitely don't want you anymore. That's why I lost you. Do you want to come to my house and be my son?" Yu Yu's face instantly darkened. She said word by word, "No." The woman's face stiffened. In fact, she really thought that Yu Yu had been abandoned by a heartless couple in the city. Didn't she hear that the city was implementing family planning? So, she thought that they abandoned her and threw her into the mountains. Looking at Yu Yu's handsome face, she was tempted. Chapter 1255. In this village, it was inevitable that people would gossip about her if she did not have a son. If she did not have a son, people would say that she had no descendants. Her husband and mother-in-law, on the other hand, would point at her and scold her for being a disappointment. Hence, she had been thinking of adopting a boy and letting him take care of them when they were old. "You can be my son. I'll take care of you and treat you well, okay? Come with Auntie." The woman felt embarrassed and tried to coax her again. Yu Yu refused. "No." Lingling spread her arms in front of Yu Yu and said, "Auntie Feng, even if Yu Yu was abandoned by his parents, he'll stay at my house. He won't go to your house." Everyone laughed. A more sensible child said, "Auntie Feng, Yu Yu is timid. Don't scare him." He then turned to Yu Yu and Lingling. Andy Feng is just joking with you. He. Yu was annoyed. He did not like it when the elders teased him like this. He was smart, so he could tell that this auntie was joking with him. Ordinary children would not be able to tell and would be scared to tears. Lingling quickly chased after him when she saw him get up and leave. Little brother, where are you going? I'm just walking around. Don't follow me. No, I'll walk with you, okay? Okay? Dishing Financial Group. The share transfer ceremony was supposed to take place at around 10 in the morning. However, due to Mu Linfeng's repeated delays, the meeting was delayed until the afternoon. In the CEO's office, Mu Yaja sat at the table, fiddling with a Zippo lighter in his hand. Beside him, Mu Linfeng sat on the sofa silently. Other than Mu Lianjue, all the major shareholders of Dishing Financial Group were present. The board of directors of Dishing Financial Group was mostly made up of internal members of the Mu family. Other than Mu Yaja, who held the most shares, Mu Linfeng and Mu Shumin were the second and third shareholders. Mu Shumin was Mu Xing's first wife's daughter. According to seniority, Mu Yaja had to address her as little aunt. Due to her secret identity, Mu Shumin had a rather conspicuous position in the political world. Therefore, she had never participated in the board meetings of Dishing Financial Group, no matter how big or small. However, it was different this time. There was actually news that her nephew was transferring his shares to Mu Lianjue. When she found out about this from Mu Linfeng, she was the first to disagree. Before Mu Yaja arrived, Mu Linfeng had already briefed them on the matter. When they heard that Mu Yaja was willing to give up his shares of Dishing Financial Group for a woman, everyone's eyes widened in shock. They were taken aback because, as bystanders, they knew very well that the man was only 27 years old. What exactly had he experienced in order to reach such a prominent position today? One must know that the Mu family's internal affairs were complicated and involved a lot of interests. Not counting the members of the main family, just the side branches of the Mu family alone had many outstanding people. To be able to reach such a level in such a big family was not as simple as shedding a layer of skin. To say that they fought until their heads bled was an understatement. Chapter 1256. It was not because of anything else but Mu Yaja's capabilities. Despite his young age, he already had extraordinary capabilities. Moreover, he had the support of Mu Sheng, the head of the family, and his second uncle, Mu Linfeng. That was why he could reach where he was today. It was like an emperor in ancient times who had conquered thousands of miles of land, but now, he had to give up his imperial power for a woman. How could they not be shocked? Ceding the shares to Mu Lianjue meant that there would be a change in the head of the Mu group from now on. This was quite a big change for the board of directors. The change of Dishing's CEO was closely related to the board's interests. A few years ago, when Mu Yaja took over Dishing from Mu Xing's hands, everyone was skeptical of him. At that time, Mu Yaja was only in his early 20s. Everyone was against handing over such a huge financial group to him. At that time, Dishing was facing a critical moment of life and death. As the CEO, he could decide the life and death of the Mu group at any time. With a single thought, all the accumulated hegemony could be destroyed overnight. The board of directors urgently needed a wise monarch to lead the financial group in the right direction. Mu Yaja had just taken office for a few days, and a few shareholders on the board of directors had made things difficult for him. They thought that he was inexperienced and could not perfectly help Dishing overcome its crisis. However, a year later, Mu Yaja gave the board of directors a perfect answer. He proved to them that not only could he do it, but he could also do it well. Today, Dishing Financial Group's businesses covered the entire world. Shopping malls, resorts, real estate, entertainment, internet, every branch of the company was much better than the other businesses in the same industry. Only then did the board of directors have nothing to say and truly acknowledge this young and promising CEO. In the past 5 years, the quarterly financial reports had increased by 100 times compared to 5 years ago. There was such a rumor circulating within Dishing Financial Group. As long as one owned even 1% of Dishing Financial Group's shares, one would not have to worry about food or clothing for the rest of one's life and enjoy endless glory and wealth. As for Mu Yaja's Dishing Financial Group, as long as he owned 0.001% of the company's shares, the annual dividends would be equivalent to the profits of an industrial company for an entire year. It could be said that Mu Yaja would not be left with nothing after leaving Dishing. After so many years, the connections he had accumulated during his reign, coupled with his own abilities, were more than enough to create an empire that truly belonged to him. As for Di Sheng, if he left him, he would probably go back to how he was a few years ago. The country's economy would also undergo great changes. In the foreseeable future, the economy would decline, industries would decline, and the stock market would shake. As the saying goes, a country cannot be without a ruler for a day. A country cannot leave its unified, correct, and effective management. Relatively speaking, this theory was very useful in a family business. Similarly, Dishing Financial Group could not afford to lose a wise leader. "You brat, don't tell me you're really going to cede your shares to that old thing?" Mu Linfeng slammed the table in a thunderous rage. Mu Yaja sneered inwardly. It seemed that this second uncle of his was going to bring the board of directors to denounce him. Chapter 1257. He had put in a lot of effort into making the Mu Group what it was today. Since Dishing Financial Group had developed to this point, he had not been able to get to where he was without his help. Back then, he was young and full of talent. However, having the ability did not mean that he had the opportunity to show off his skills. After all, it was very difficult for him to gain the approval of the board of directors when he was only in his early 20s without the accumulation of connections. Back then, it was also his second uncle who supported him against everyone's objections. His original intention was to hand over the Mu Group to him so that it could reach a higher level. Mu Yaja did not disappoint him. He did it. However, now, he was actually willing to give up the Mu Group's great foundation for a woman? What Mu Linfeng did not want to admit was that even if Mu Yaja left the Mu Group, he would still become the cream of the crop and the cream of the crop. However, if he left the Mu Group, it would only sink rapidly and would no longer be the overlord who could summon the wind and rain. Mu Linfeng's worries were not unfounded. As early as 2 years ago, Mu Yaja had started to cultivate his own power outside. He knew very well that no matter how big the Dishing Financial Group was, it could not be bigger than the sky. No matter how deep the foundation was, it could not be deeper than the ground. Since ancient times, there had never been a family that could run rampant for hundreds of years. Everything had always started from nothing and then from something to nothing. Yin and yang alternated, and the cycle repeated itself. No matter how small a grain of sand was, it could still accumulate from small to large. No matter how big a foundation was, it could still collapse. Moreover, the Mu Group was a family-run business. The capital and shares were mainly controlled by a member of the Mu family. He was already sick of it. Every time he made a decision, there would always be a few small figures from the family who would jump out to protest. He was also sick of being suppressed by the elders and being ordered around. He was Mu Yaja. There was no saying that he could not live without the Mu family. Since he could push the Mu Group to the top 6 years ago, he could also build his own empire within 6 years. Moreover, he was such a proud man. Once he grasped the opportunity, he would build the world that belonged to him. In fact, in the past few years, he had been secretly diverting people from his businesses. In the past few years, he had gathered people to form an elite group. If he left the Mu Group, other than a large group of elites leaving with him, he would also take a group of talents that he had cultivated with him. Other than that, he would also ruthlessly cut off a large piece of Di Sheng's flesh. After all, that was what he deserved. The Mu family was such a big family. They had outstanding talents, but they also had lazy good-for-nothings. These people were like locusts, gnawing at the monument that he had condensed with all his hard work until it was full of holes. He had already deeply experienced the drawbacks of family-run enterprises. The internal structure of the Mu Group was gradually decaying. He did not want his hard work to be dragged down by these locusts. He, Mu Yaja, would never allow anyone to be above him. Be it Mu Sheng or Mu Lianjue. It was still Mu Linfeng. Good. He was so proud. How could he tolerate these people becoming his fetters? As for the kindness that Mu Linfeng had shown him, he was grateful. However, after working hard for him for so many years, it should be enough to repay him, right? Chapter 1258. Mu Shumin paused for a moment before asking sternly, "Have you ever thought about whether it's worth it for you to do this? Is it worth it for a woman?" Mu Yaja raised his head and looked at her coldly. "Why isn't it worth it?" "It's worth it." "Worth it?" Mu Shumin coldly snorted, but disapprovingly. He. I'd like to see for myself who this woman is to make my nephew, who has always been indifferent to women, fall so deeply in love with her. Yaja, don't be silly. You'll really regret it if you give up the Mu Group's foundation for a dirty woman. Mu Yaja's lips curled up slightly, clearly disagreeing with her words. In fact, Yun Shishir was already under his protection. The two children had already escaped from Mu Lianjue's captivity, but Yu Yu's whereabouts were still unknown. Although she was not in Mu Lianjue's hands, he could very well cancel this matter and not transfer the shares to him. However, he was worried that the latter would fly into a rage out of humiliation and secretly send someone to kill Yu Yu. If that happened, the loss would outweigh the gain. If a mere Mu group could be used to exchange for Yuntianyo's safety, then this deal was worth it. Of course, Mu Linfeng would not let this matter rest. "Auntie, do you think that I don't know what I'm doing? I, Mu Yaja, am not someone who can't live without anyone. No matter what, you can't transfer the shares in your hands to someone else. You should know how important you are to Disheng and what kind of position you have in the company." Mu Yaja stood up abruptly. His slender figure was tall and straight, and his aura was domineering. He slowly leaned against the table with his hands in his trouser pockets and lazily declared, "Auntie, I hope that you'll understand one thing, Disheng can be mine. However, I will never belong to Disheng." Mu Shumin was infuriated, but he suppressed his anger and tried his best to calm down as he negotiated with him. "Yaja, I know that you are capable and charismatic. But at the same time, you should also be responsible, right?" Mu Yaja remained expressionless and did not speak. Mu Shumin became even more anxious. However, due to her status, she had to maintain a certain attitude. Thus, she maintained a reserved demeanor from beginning to end. Mu Linfeng slammed the table and stood up. "Give up. I will never let you play with our hard work like this. There is only one CEO in Mu Group, and it can only be you. Yaja, listen to me. I've been through this before. When I was young, I was as impulsive as you. But second uncle knows your ambition and your courage. However, things like women will only become your fetters. You shouldn't be so impulsive because of a woman." "Women? Something like that?" Mu Yaja furrowed his brows all of a sudden. His gaze was as cold as an iceberg crashing into it. Chapter 1259. Mu Linfeng ignored his expression and said coldly, "I understand. You're not young anymore, and it's time for you to start a family. However, you should be clear about your status. You can have women, but they can't be those indecent ones. I'll find a few more women for you another day. No matter what kind of women they are, as long as you want them, with your status, which woman won't want to throw herself at you? Why are you so stubborn? Don't tell me that it has to be her." Mu Yaja's lips curled into a playful smile. His handsome brows raised slightly, and his eyes were filled with devilish charm. "I have to have her. What can you say?" "No." Mu Shumin suddenly stood up and said agitatedly, "No matter what, that woman can't be." "Why can't she be?" Mu Yaja retorted. He wanted to hear what Mu Shumin would say in front of so many people. Mu Shumin snorted and looked around. Before he could say anything, he put on the airs of an elder and a superior and raised his head high. Apart from a few important figures of the Mu family, Mu Shumin, Mu Linfeng and his wife, Li Lijun, and Mu Yancheng and his wife, Rong Lanlin, were all present. The remaining members of the Mu family were the fans of these people. At most, they were here to show their support. If they were asked to speak, they would not dare to do so at all. In front of Mu Yaja, they would not dare to act rashly no matter what. However, just Mu Shumin and Mu Linfeng alone were more difficult to deal with. Their seniority was much higher than his. Back then, Mu Sheng had been looking forward to Mu Wanren marrying into the family. Mu Shumin and Mu Linfeng stood on the same side and were against it. The main reason why Mu Wanren could not marry him was because of their repeated opposition. Speaking of which, these two people had a lot of power, and they were currently the two biggest obstacles in front of him. He admitted that Mu Linfeng had indeed promoted and helped him. He had even saved him from dire straits. Back then, as the legitimate grandson of the main wife, he had outstanding ability and was the most likely candidate for the successor. Thus, after his parents passed away one after another, he was all alone in the Mu family and treaded on thin ice. It was Mu Linfeng who took him away and gave him a superior environment to grow up in. For this, he was grateful. He was a sentimental person. At the same time, he was also a person who knew how to be grateful. It was precisely because of this that he did not do so, even though he had so many opportunities to transfer Mu Group's assets to his own name. However, as time passed, he gradually realized that Mu Linfeng's care and support for him wasn't pure. There seemed to be a motive behind it, and it was as if he was using him. He was very unhappy about this. Although he did not show it, in the past few years, he gradually rebelled against Mu Linfeng's orders and no longer obeyed him. Mu Linfeng must be wary of this and was secretly dividing the board of directors. Those little tricks could not be hidden from him at all. Mu Shumin, on the other hand, was completely using him. In fact, she could not wait for Mu Yaxia to abdicate his position. If he transferred his shares to her, she would have nothing to say. Chapter 1260. Mu Shumin's original intention was for Mu Yaxia to be the head of the family for a few years while secretly carving up the family's assets. When the time came, she would push Mu Yaxia out of his position and let her son take it. However, it was clearly not the right time for Mu Yaxia to give up his position. Her son was only in his teens and was still young. She would have to wait until he was at least in his 20s before she could find an opportunity to help him take the position. She was born from a concubine and did not have much status in the family. However, she had inherited her mother's beauty. She served in the military when she was young and married into a prestigious family when she was in her 20s. Her status in the Mu family instantly rose, and with her husband's prominent status, she had the right to speak in the family. In fact, Mu Lianjue's matter was not that simple. One must know that most of the people he had sent this time had military backgrounds. In the entire Mu family, Mu Linfeng had the deepest military background. In other words, he was fully capable of stopping Mu Lianjue, but he did not. Why? It was because he wanted to use Mu Lianjue to get rid of Yun Shishir and her son, ruthlessly kicking away these two stumbling blocks in front of Mu Yaxia. This way, he could secretly use Mu Lianjue to get rid of these two thorns in his flesh without having to make a move himself. He did not wish for Mu Yaxia to have any attachments or weaknesses in his heart. Mu Linfeng was afraid that a person like him would become irresolute and indecisive once he had any attachments. This would delay the Mu group's future because of a bit of affection for a girl. Mu Yaxia was not stupid. He could tell that his uncle had ulterior motives. Thus, he secretly made a decision on the spot. It seemed that there was no need to be merciful to these people anymore. He would not transfer his shares. However, he would not be merciful to them anymore either. Mu Shumin sized up his expression and suddenly sneered. Yaxia, it's not that I want to nag at you, but you can play with women, but you should also judge the situation and size up the situation. No matter what, you can't cross the line or go overboard. You should be clear of the Mu family's rules. Since when did you set your eyes on a woman with a dubious background in the entertainment industry? In my eyes, you've always been a child with good taste. Some women can't be touched. I know the entertainment industry well. Women who can make a name for themselves must be unrestrained behind the scenes. I've heard of Yun Shishir's name before. She's not a clean woman. Listen to Auntie's advice, stay away from this kind of woman. Play with other women. Play. Mu Yaxia coldly tugged at the corner of his lips as his eyes turned frosty. Auntie, you're mistaken about something. He was serious when it came to Xianxia. He was not just playing around with her. Mu Shumin was surprised to hear that. What is it? Speaking of which, I happen to have something to announce to the few elders. Mu Yaja suddenly turned around and sat down on the sofa. Facing the few important figures of the Mu family, he announced, previously, the Mu group announced a media conference, but due to some unforeseen circumstances, it has been postponed again and again. After this is over, regardless of whether I'm the CEO of the Mu group or not, I will announce my marriage at this media conference. Marriage announcement? Chapter 1261. Mu Shumin widened her eyes in shock. Who are you planning to announce your marriage to? She suddenly guessed something. Don't tell me it's that Xianxia. Yes, I've decided to announce my marriage to her. He crossed his legs elegantly, and his domineering aura swept through every corner of the office. Mu Yaja coldly swept his gaze across the room and said in a cold voice, I know this is a sudden announcement, so I'm informing all of you first. No way. Mu Shumin was the first to stand up and reject him, sizing him up in disbelief. Her face, however, was filled with unconcealable disappointment and heartache. She initially thought that her nephew was just toying with that woman, but even if it was just a game, she would not allow it. She did not expect him to say something so shocking, saying that he would announce his marriage to her at a media conference. This news was too shocking. That kind of woman will never be able to step into the Mu family's doorstep. Yaja, are you crazy? If you marry that woman, what will the outside world think of us? I heard that she's the woman who was your surrogate 6 years ago. I also heard that she gave birth to 2 children back then, and in the past 6 years, she secretly hid one of them. This is clearly a conspiracy. To think that you're so smart, can't you see that she's planning to use her son as a bargaining chip to marry into the Mu family? She should take a look at her status and see if she's worthy of the title of the Mu family's young mistress. That kind of woman isn't even fit to carry my shoes. Mu Shumin knitted her delicate brows. Her heavily made-up face was filled with disdain and contempt. She had always been prejudiced against women in the entertainment industry. She always felt that they were dirty and cheap, and that they would do anything to climb the social ladder. Therefore, in her eyes, Xianxia was the same. Mu Linfeng's face darkened as he expressionlessly said, Yaja, second uncle should also think that you should start your own family at your age. However, I'm also opposed to this woman marrying into the family. Second uncle's attitude is clear, as long as I'm still alive, I won't allow her to take a step into the Mu family. His tone was firm and unyielding, leaving no room for rebuttal. Mu Yaja scanned the crowd's disapproving looks and sat up straight expressionlessly. His languid posture resembled that of an elegant emperor. His expression was leisurely and indifferent as he slowly parted his thin lips. Announcing my marriage to all of you is out of respect for all of you. I'm just informing the elders of the Mu family. It doesn't mean that you have the right to stop or interfere. Have the right to interfere? I'm your aunt. As your elder, don't I have the right to ask about your marriage? Chapter 1262. I dote on you, so I can't just watch you marry a slut. Can you understand Auntie's good intentions? Besides, this woman wants to use the child to blackmail you. He. Dream on. I'll put it this way, Mu Yichen's child will be acknowledged by the Muse. However, we won't acknowledge Xianxia's son. She can forget about bringing that little b*st*rd into the Muse house. Little b*st*rd? Mu Yaja narrowed his eyes dangerously. Mu Shumin was startled. She was well aware that she had been too agitated. So much so that she had blurted out some words without thinking. She was extremely vexed for a moment. So, she fiercely bit her red lips and stopped talking. Mu Linfeng glared at her angrily, too. She called Yun Tianyu a little b***st** road. Was she not insulting the Mu family? No matter how useless Yun Tianyu was, the blood of the Mu family still flowed in his veins. Mu Yaja smiled and retorted coldly, What's wrong, auntie? I'm the one marrying her. It's not up to you to worry about my woman, is it? How is it not up to me to worry? Mu Shumen's tone turned sharp when she saw the sarcasm in his words. Yaja, oh, Yaja, I think you're getting more and more. How dare you say such disgraceful words? Are you blind? You don't want a good woman, but you want a shady woman? You can afford to lose face, but the muse can't. It's fine if you don't do something stupid, but you implicate the rest of the family. They can't even raise their heads after you. Disheng's CEO is actually marrying a showbiz actress as his wife. Just thinking about it makes me blush. As Mu Shumen spoke, she sneered and said, moreover, why don't you think about your current status? Yes, you're the strongest candidate for the Mu family's head, but I hope you're clear that you're just a candidate and have yet to ascend to the position of the family head. Don't lose your position because of a woman, the loss outweighs the gain. That's right, Yaja. Don't let your emotions get the better of you. You're being too impulsive. Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows slightly. Don't tell me that since I'm the head of the family, I have the final say in this marriage? We'll talk about it when you become the patriarch. Mu Shumen sneered coldly. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of Mu Yaja's subtle movements. He clasped his hands together. His left index finger and thumb were rubbing something carefully. Mu Yaja opened his eyes, his aura intimidating. Mu Shumen suddenly widened his eyes and looked over. She suddenly noticed the ruby ring he wore on his right thumb. Inside the ruby ring is the Mu family's emblem. A dragon's seal that pierced through the clouds and swallowed the heavens. That's the Mu family's family tattoo that has been passed down for generations. The possession of this ring means the possession of the Mu clan's supreme power. Only the head of the Mu Jia can have this ancient ring that has been passed down for hundreds of years. Mu Shumen's eyes suddenly widened. Mu Linfeng followed her astonished gaze and could not help but be shocked as well. When the crowd saw the ancient ring on his hand, their faces stiffened, and their eyes could not help but be filled with reverence. When did this happen? Mu Shumen could not even speak coherently. Mu Yaja did not even raise his eyebrows and remained silent.